Imagine a man on an endless shore. The sun warms his skin. The soft sound of waves kisses the sand. He bends down and scoops up a handful of fine, white sand, a seemingly perfect, contained piece of the world. He wants to keep it, to possess this moment of simple fullness. So he closes his hand and he squeezes, believing that the pressure of his will can hold it all together. But the harder he squeezes, the more the sand escapes, streaming through the gaps between his fingers, until his palm is empty, marked only by the faint impression of what he tried so desperately to hold. He is left with nothing but the feeling of loss, the strain in his own hand. This man, in so many ways, is us. We live in the heart of a storm, a hurricane of the urgent. We are caught in the relentless current of modern life, a current defined by the pressure to become, to achieve, to acquire. Our sense of self, our very identity, is often built upon foundations as shifting as sand. Our job titles, the number of likes on a screen, the possessions we gather around us as a fortress against the deep, unnamed emptiness. We measure our worth against the curated highlight reels of other people's lives, and we run on a treadmill of wanting more, fearing we are not enough. We build a story of me, a character we must constantly defend, promote, and satisfy. And in doing so, we have built a beautiful, intricate prison, a prison of our own design, with walls built from our own anxieties and bars forged from our own attachments. We are the prisoner, and we are also the guard, pacing restlessly in the corridors of our own mind. But what if there is another way? What if the solution isn't to squeeze harder, to build stronger walls, to run faster? What if, instead of clenching his fist, the man on the beach simply opened his hand? He would see that the sand was never his to possess, but it was always his to experience. He could feel its texture, its warmth, its impermanence, without the desperate need to own it. In that gentle opening, there is no loss, only a quiet, profound connection to the world as it is. This is the path offered by ancient Buddhist wisdom, not as a religion of rigid rules, but as a profound science of the mind, a practical map for navigating our inner world. It is a path that does not ask you to believe in anything outside of your own experience, but invites you to look deeply within. In that journey of looking within, the path to freeing ourselves from the prison of anxiety begins with a single, radical, and deeply liberating idea: the truth of no self. Before we can truly grasp the profound freedom of no self, we must first become intimately familiar with the self we believe we are. We must walk through the rooms of the prison we have built, not with judgment, but with a gentle, illuminating curiosity. We must meet the architect of our own anxiety. In the language of this ancient wisdom, this architect is often called the ego. This is not the ego of modern psychology, a component of the psyche to be balanced, but something more fundamental, more illusory. It is the perceived center of our universe, the constant, humming source of our inner turmoil. It is the narrator in our head, the tireless storyteller who weaves the epic tale of me. To understand the ego is the first crucial step toward disarming it, not by force, but by seeing it clearly for what it is, a ghost we have mistaken for a king. The ego's primary function, its very substance, is to create a story. From the moment we are old enough to form thoughts, this inner narrator begins its work, spinning a continuous thread of identity. It gathers materials from everywhere. It takes a memory from childhood, a comment from a teacher, a success at work, a painful breakup, and it weaves them together into a seemingly coherent narrative. This story becomes our identity card. I am a creative person. I am not good with numbers. I am a victim of my circumstances. I am a self-made success. I am the kind of person who is always anxious. I am the rock for my family. These are not just fleeting thoughts. They become the very pillars of our perceived self. The story is constantly updated, edited, and defended. When we meet someone new, we present them with a polished summary of this story. When we are alone, we review its chapters, dwelling on past grievances or rehearsing future triumphs. The profound problem is not that the story exists, but that we believe in it unconditionally. We mistake the narrative for the narrator, the character for the actor. We become so deeply engrossed in the movie of me that we forget we are the consciousness watching it. This story, by its very nature, is a product of time. It is built from the ghosts of the past, the regrets and nostalgic longings that we carry like heavy stones in our pockets. And it is projected onto the phantom of the future, the canvas for all our hopes, dreams, and, most potently, our fears. The ego rarely, if ever, lives in the present moment. It cannot, because in the pure, unadulterated reality of the now, the story dissolves. In the simple sensation of breath entering your lungs, or the feeling of warmth from a cup of tea in your hands, there is no story of me. There is only being. And this is terrifying to the ego, which thrives on the drama of past and future. It is this constant pulling away from the present into the regrets of yesterday and the anxieties of tomorrow that forms the very fabric of our chronic unease. In order to maintain this story of a separate, solid me, the ego must perform a crucial and ultimately tragic division. It must draw a thick, dark line between me and everything that is not me. This is its core survival mechanism. The world is split in two, me and the other. My body, my thoughts, my feelings, my possessions, my beliefs on one side and yours on the other. This fundamental act of separation is the seed from which a forest of suffering grows. It gives rise to the poison of comparison. The ego cannot exist in a vacuum. It needs a measuring stick. So it looks at others and constantly asks, how do I stack up? This endless measurement creates only two possible outcomes, both of which are forms of suffering. If we judge ourselves as better than another, more successful, more intelligent, more enlightened, we experience a fleeting, fragile sense of pride. It is a precarious pleasure because it depends entirely on the other person remaining lesser, and we live in constant fear of them catching up. If we judge ourselves as worse, we fall into the pit of envy, resentment, and self-pity. We see their happiness not as a beautiful thing in itself, but as a personal affront, a reminder of what we lack. The entire universe of social media is a grand cathedral built for the worship of this comparison, and it is no wonder that it has become a primary source of modern anxiety. This division also fuels blame and judgment. When things go wrong, the ego's first instinct is to protect its narrative. If the story is, I am a competent person, and a project at work fails, the ego cannot easily accept responsibility. Instead, it searches for an external cause. It blames a colleague, the economy, the unfairness of the boss. It creates an external enemy to preserve its internal sense of righteousness. We judge others for their beliefs, their lifestyles, their choices, because their difference is a perceived threat to the validity of our own story. By making them wrong, we get to feel right. This sense of separation extends beyond the individual. It becomes the identity of the group, my family against other families, my team against their team, my political party against theirs, my nation against theirs. The root is the same, the creation of an us and a them. The ego convinces us that our safety lies in strengthening the walls between us, when in reality, these are the very walls of our prison cell. Deep within its core, the ego is aware of its own fraudulence. It knows it is a construct, a house of cards built on the shifting sands of time. It knows that its identity is tied to things that are fundamentally impermanent. A healthy body that will one day sicken and fail, a sharp mind that will one day dull, relationships that will change or end, a life that is finite. This deep, instinctual knowledge of its own impermanence gives rise to the ego's most profound characteristic, a desperate, clawing hunger for permanence. It is terrified of dissolution. It is terrified of change, of loss, and most of all, of death. This terror is the engine that drives its relentless activity. The lifelong quest for more money, more power, more fame is not just a quest for pleasure, it is a quest for solidity. It is an attempt to build a monument to me so large and so magnificent that it might just last forever. It is an attempt to shout its name so loudly that it will drown out the silent whisper of impermanence. This is why we cling. We cling to possessions, hoping they will secure our identity. We cling to relationships, demanding that they stay the same, that they continue to validate our story. We cling to our youth, our opinions, our achievements. This clinging, this resistance to the natural flow of life, is the very definition of stress. Anxiety is the friction created when the ego's desire for a permanent, predictable world clashes with the fluid, ever-changing reality of the universe. We are trying to nail the river to its bed, and the strain of this impossible task manifests as the chronic tension in our shoulders, the knot in our stomach, the racing thoughts that keep us awake at night. The stronger our identification with this ego self, the more we have to protect, the more we have to lose, and the greater our fear will be. There is a timeless story, often attributed to the Cherokee people, that perfectly illustrates this inner conflict. An old man is teaching his grandson about life. He says, "A fight is going on inside me. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. Point one. One wolf is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, soup two, priority, and ego. Point three." He continued, "The other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old man simply replied, "The one you feed." This story is not about eliminating the first wolf. The impulses of fear, anger, and separation are part of our human conditioning. The path of wisdom is not about engaging in a violent inner war to destroy the ego. Such a war would only strengthen it, for the ego loves a good fight. The path, instead, is about learning to recognize the voice of that first wolf. It is to see its fear, to understand its mechanisms, and to consciously, gently, and consistently withdraw our attention from it. It is about learning to feed the other wolf. Every time we choose compassion over judgment, every time we choose acceptance over resistance, every time we let go of our story for just a moment and rest in the simple reality of our breath, we are nourishing that second wolf. We are watering the seeds of peace that already exist within us. We have now met the architect. We have seen how it draws its blueprints from the stories of past and future, how it builds walls of separation and comparison, and how its entire structure is motivated by a deep fear of its own collapse. We see the source of the constant, low-grade fever of anxiety that defines so much of modern life. But for any structure to stand, it must have a foundation. What is the ground upon which this entire fragile house of the ego is built? It is built upon a single, powerful, and pervasive illusion. The illusion that things last, that the world is solid, and that our self is a permanent entity within it. To find true freedom, we must now look beneath our feet and examine this very foundation. We must come to understand the profound and liberating truth of impermanence. We stand now amidst the ruins of the ego's narrative, having met the anxious architect that lives within us. We have seen how it builds its identity from the flimsy materials of memory and desire. But every structure, no matter how grand or how fragile, must rest upon a foundation. The entire fortress of the self, with all its fears and defenses, is built upon one single, fundamental assumption. An assumption so deeply embedded in our consciousness that we rarely think to question it. The belief that things are solid, stable, and permanent. To truly dismantle the prison of anxiety, we must go deeper than the walls. We must examine the very ground beneath our feet. We must come face to face with the profound, challenging, and ultimately liberating reality of impermanence. In the ancient language of the Buddha, this concept is called anicca. For many, the idea of impermanence sounds like a pessimistic or nihilistic doctrine, a gloomy reminder that everything we love will fade and die. But this is a profound misunderstanding. Anicca is not a belief system to be adopted. It is a simple, direct, and neutral description of reality. It is a law of the universe, as fundamental as gravity. To understand impermanence is not to become sad, but to become free. The great spiritual teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti once said, "The ending of something is the beginning of something new." Impermanence is not just about death. It is also the very possibility of birth, of growth, of change, of renewal. Without impermanence, a wound could never heal, a child could never grow, the spring could never follow the winter. Life is not a static photograph, it is a flowing river. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus pointed this out centuries ago. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. This is the essence of anicca, Let us look for this truth, not in ancient texts, but in the world around us and within us. Look to the grandest scale. The mountains that seem to be the very definition of solidity are, over eons, being ground down into dust by wind and rain. Stars, those celestial fires that have guided travelers for millennia, are born in fiery nebulas and will one day collapse and die. The continents themselves are adrift on a sea of molten rock, constantly, imperceptibly, rearranging the face of our planet. Now, bring your gaze closer to home. The city you live in is not the same city it was a decade ago. Buildings rise and fall, neighborhoods change their character. The very language we speak evolves, with new words emerging and old ones fading away. The chair you are sitting on, which feels so solid beneath you, is in a slow, silent process of decay. Its atoms vibrating, its materials aging. Now, turn the lens of observation inward, upon the most intimate territory of all, your own body. We speak of my body as if it is a fixed object that we own, like a car. But it is nothing of the sort. Your body is a process, a verb, a bustling metropolis of change. Scientists tell us that nearly every cell in our body is replaced over a period of 7 to 10 years. The hand you hold before your face is not the same hand you had as a child. With every single breath, you are aging. You are not the same person, physically, that you were when you began listening to this sentence. This is not a morbid thought. It is a fact of biology, a testament to the dynamic, flowing nature of life itself. And what of our inner world, our thoughts and feelings? Here, the river of impermanence flows fastest of all. Try to hold on to a single thought for just 1 minute. It is impossible. Another thought arises, unbidden. A memory surfaces, an image flashes, a plan for later intrudes. Our mind is a waterfall of ceaseless mental activity, and our emotions are like the weather. Joy visits us, like a sunny day, warms us, and then, inevitably, clouds gather and it passes. Anger can flare up like a sudden thunderstorm, powerful and dramatic, but it too subsides. Sadness can settle in like a gentle, persistent rain, but eventually, the rain stops. We cause ourselves tremendous suffering by trying to control this inner weather. We desperately try to cling to the sunny days, holding our breath, hoping they will last forever. And we desperately try to push away the storms, building flimsy walls of distraction and denial. We want to feel happy all the time, but trying to grasp a single emotional state is like trying to capture the wind in a jar. You cannot do it, and the attempt itself is exhausting. Here we find the very heart of the matter, the mechanism by which the neutral fact of impermanence is converted into the personal experience of suffering. The universe is in a constant state of flow. The ego, as we have seen, is on a desperate quest for permanence and security. When the ego's desire for a fixed, predictable world collides with the universe's true nature, which is fluid and unpredictable, the result is friction. That friction is what we experience as stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction, or what in Buddhism is called dukkha. This resistance takes two primary forms. The first is clinging. When we experience something pleasant, a moment of success, the warmth of a loving embrace, a beautiful sunset, the ego immediately says, I want more of this. I don't want this to end. We try to fossilize the moment, to possess it, but life does not work that way. The success fades, the embrace ends, the sun sets. And because we were clinging so tightly, the passing of the moment feels like a personal loss, a tragedy. The pain comes not from the fact that the moment ended, but from the violence of our grip, from our resistance to its natural passing. We are like a child at the beach, building a beautiful sandcastle and then weeping when the tide inevitably comes in and washes it away. A wiser mind would build the castle, enjoy its beauty fully, knowing all along that its nature is to be reclaimed by the sea. The second form of resistance is aversion, or pushing away. When we encounter something unpleasant, physical pain, criticism from others, a difficult emotion like fear or grief, the ego's reaction is, get this away from me. I don't want this. We tense up, we resist, we fight against the reality of the moment. The initial pain is the first arrow, but our resistance, our story about the pain, this is terrible, I can't stand this. Why is this happening to me? Is the second arrow, which we fire into ourselves. This second arrow is often far more painful than the first. The suffering is not the pain itself, but our desperate struggle against it. By understanding impermanence, we learn not to fire that second arrow. We learn to meet the pain with a certain softness and allowing, recognizing that it too, like everything else, will change and pass. This is not just a philosophy to be contemplated. It is a reality to be directly experienced. And the laboratory for this experiment is always with you. The most powerful tool for realizing impermanence is your own breath. For a moment, just notice the process of breathing. There is an in-breath. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Then there is a pause. Then there is an out-breath, with its own beginning, middle, and end. Each breath is born, it lives for a moment, and it dies. And then another is born. It is a perfect, miniature cycle of life itself, happening continuously. By simply placing your attention on this endless, gentle rhythm, you are training your mind to be with change, to be comfortable with the flow. You can do the same with the sensations in your body. As you sit, you might notice an itch on your arm. Instead of immediately scratching it, just observe it. Notice where it begins and ends. Does its intensity change? Does it move? If you watch it with patient curiosity, you will find that it is not a solid, static thing. It is a shimmering, vibrating field of energy that arises, changes, and eventually fades away, all by itself. By doing this with small sensations, we build the mental muscle to be with larger, more difficult sensations, both physical and emotional, without being overwhelmed by them. We learn from direct experience that everything is a process, not a permanent state. There is a story of a great Zen master who owned a beautiful, handcrafted teacup. He loved this cup. He used it every day and spoke of it as one of his prized possessions. His students were always puzzled by his attachment to this material object. One day, a student asked him, "Master, you teach us about non-attachment, yet you seem to love this cup so much. Why?" The master smiled and said, "I do love this cup, but for me, it is already broken." He went on to explain that he saw in the cup its entire life cycle. He saw the clay being dug from the earth, the potter's hands shaping it, the fire of the kiln that gave it strength. And he saw its future, the inevitable day when it would slip, or be dropped, or simply crack with age and return to the earth as a pile of shards. By holding the reality of its impermanence in his mind, he was completely free to enjoy its beauty and utility in the present moment, without a single shred of anxiety about its future. His love for the cup was not diminished by this knowledge. It was deepened and made more poignant. This is the great wisdom of accepting anicca. It does not lead to apathy or carelessness. It leads to a profound and vibrant engagement with life. When you know that every moment is precious and unrepeatable, you begin to pay more attention. You savor the taste of your food more deeply. You listen to your loved ones with greater care. You appreciate the beauty of a simple flower more fully, knowing it will soon wilt. By embracing impermanence, we become more flexible, more resilient. We stop trying to build our house on the frozen surface of a winter pond, and instead, we learn to sail the flowing river of life. The clear seeing of impermanence shakes the house of the ego to its very core. It dissolves the solid ground on which it was built. If nothing is permanent, if everything is in flux, then what is there to cling to? The ego's great project of securing itself is revealed to be a fool's errand. This realization is profoundly liberating, but it also raises a crucial question. If everything is in a state of flow, why is our instinct to grasp so strong? What is the nature of this clenched fist, this insatiable hunger that compels us to resist the very nature of reality? To continue our journey, we must now turn our attention to the magnetic force of desire and attachment itself. We must investigate the anatomy of the monkey trap. We have journeyed to the foundation of the ego's fragile house and found that it stands on shifting ground, the undeniable reality of impermanence. We have seen that life is a river, not a fortress. And yet, if this is true, a powerful question arises. Why do we spend our lives fighting against this current? If the river's nature is to flow, why do we exhaust ourselves trying to build dams? The answer lies in a force as powerful and primal as thirst, a deep, restless energy within the human heart. In Buddhist psychology, This force is called tanha. It can be translated as craving or thirst, but its meaning is deeper than mere desire. It is the insatiable hunger of the ego, the compulsive grasping of the mind that seeks to pull the fleeting world into itself, to own it, to consume it, in a desperate attempt to feel whole and secure. This is the engine that drives our resistance to reality. This is the force that clenches our fist. There is a story that serves as a perfect map for this territory of the human mind. In some parts of the world, hunters have a very clever way of trapping monkeys. They take a coconut or a hollowed-out gourd and drill a hole in it, a hole just large enough for a monkey to slide its open hand through. Inside the gourd, they place a sweet treat, like a piece of fruit or some rice. They then tie the gourd to the base of a tree and wait. Sooner or later, a monkey will come along, smell the sweet prize, and slip its slender hand into the opening. It will grasp the food, closing its fingers around it to form a fist. But now, its fist is too large to pull back through the narrow opening. The monkey will pull and shriek, twisting and turning, but it cannot get free. The strange and tragic part of the story is this: the monkey is not truly trapped by the gourd. There is no physical barrier holding it. All it has to do to be free is to open its hand, to let go of the prize. But its craving is so strong, its attachment to that small morsel so absolute, that it will not let go. It will remain there, a prisoner of its own desire, until the hunters return. We are this monkey. We are held captive not by the world, but by our own clenched fist, by our own refusal to let go of the prizes we have grasped. These prizes are the objects of our craving, our possessions, our reputation, our youth, our beliefs, our cherished relationships, our very ideas of who we are. And we sacrifice our freedom, our peace of mind, for the sake of clinging to them. Now, it is crucial to make a distinction here, for this wisdom is not a call for a life of cold, passionless apathy. Buddhism differentiates between two kinds of desire. There is wholesome desire, or chanda. This is the desire to learn, to grow, to create, to help others. It is the aspiration that motivates a doctor to heal, an artist to paint, a parent to nurture their child. This kind of desire is a source of positive energy. It is expansive and generous. Then there is tanha, the blind, feverish craving we are exploring. The difference lies in the feeling tone. Chanda feels like an inspired aspiration. Tanha feels like a desperate need. Chanda says, it would be wonderful to build a loving home. Tanha says, I must have this person, or I will be miserable and lonely forever. Chanda is the energy that moves us towards something with wisdom and grace. Tanha is the frantic grasping of a drowning man, pulling everything down with him. The path to freedom is not about extinguishing all desire. It is about transforming blind craving into wise aspiration. This craving, this tanha, manifests in three primary ways. The first is the most obvious, the craving for sense pleasures, or kama tanha. This is the endless pursuit of satisfaction through our five senses. The craving for delicious tastes, for beautiful sights, for captivating music, for pleasant physical contact, for luxurious comfort. Our entire consumer culture is a massive engine designed to provoke and exploit this form of craving. It constantly whispers to us that happiness is just one purchase away. That new phone, that fashionable outfit, that exotic vacation, that gourmet Melthus, it promises, will be the thing that finally fills the void. But we all know from experience that it never does. The pleasure we get from a new possession is fleeting. The satisfaction is temporary. It's like drinking salt water to quench a thirst. For a moment it seems to help, but it ultimately leaves us even thirstier than before. We are left on a treadmill of wanting, acquiring, and then wanting again, a cycle that provides fleeting pleasure but no lasting peace. The second form of craving is more subtle and in many ways more powerful. It is the craving for existence or for becoming, bhava tanha. This is the deep, desperate desire of the ego to be somebody, to solidify its identity and make it permanent. It is the hunger for fame, for status, for power, for reputation. It's the drive to be seen as important, successful, intelligent, or special. It's the yearning to leave a mark on the world, to build a legacy that will outlast our mortal bodies. This is the craving that fuels the workaholic, the obsessive politician, the artist driven not by creation, but by the need for applause. It is the ego's grand project to carve its name into the flowing river of time. This craving is so powerful because it masks itself as noble ambition, but at its root is the same fear we have seen before. The terror of being a nobody, the terror of impermanence, the terror of death. It is the ego fighting for its own survival. The third form may seem paradoxical. It is the craving for non-existence, vibhava tanha. This is the craving to get rid of something. It is the energy of aversion, hatred, anger, and annihilation. When we are experiencing something unpleasant, whether it is physical pain, a difficult emotion like shame, or the presence of a person we dislike, this craving arises as a violent wish for it to be gone. I can't stand this feeling. I wish I never had to see him again. I just want this all to end. In its most extreme form, this craving for non-existence can manifest as self-harm or suicidal thoughts, the ultimate desire to annihilate the self that is perceived as the source of suffering. But this too is a form of clinging. It is clinging to an idea of a reality that is free from the unpleasant thing. It is still a violent resistance to what is. Whether we are desperately pulling something toward us or desperately pushing it away, we are still caught in the same struggle, the same war against reality. We are still that monkey, with its fist clenched tightly. This is the cruel logic of craving, the rigged game it plays with our minds. It presents us with a no-win scenario. Consider the two possible outcomes of any craving. The first outcome is that you don't get what you want. The result is immediate and obvious suffering. You feel frustration, disappointment, envy, a sense of lack. Your mind fixates on the object of your desire, and you feel incomplete without it. The second outcome is that you actually succeed. You get the promotion, you buy the dream house, you win the affection of the person you desire. There is a moment of victory, a rush of pleasure, a feeling of relief. But what happens next? Almost immediately, two new seeds of suffering are planted. First, the law of impermanence ensures that the pleasure will fade. The novelty wears off. The dream house requires repairs. The perfect relationship reveals its human complexities. The initial high subsides, and the underlying thirst returns. And second, a new and insidious fear is born, the fear of loss. Now that you have this precious thing, you must guard it. You worry about it being taken away, about it breaking, about it leaving you. The object of your desire has now become a source of anxiety. You are no longer suffering from wanting it. You are suffering from the fear of losing it. This is the cycle of dissatisfaction, the endless treadmill of desire. We are a hungry ghost, with a throat the size of a needle and a stomach the size of a mountain, never able to get enough to feel full. The world's promise is that happiness lies outside of us, in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next experience. But the wisdom of the monkey trap shows us the truth. Freedom is not found by getting the prize. Freedom is found by simply opening our hand. It is found in the moment we choose to let go. We are the monkey, trapped by a fist clenched tight by the force of craving. This craving is the fire that fuels our discontent. But a fire needs oxygen to burn, and often, the oxygen that turns the small flame of personal desire into a raging inferno is one of the ego's most toxic and pervasive habits. The habit of looking over its shoulder to see what the other monkeys have, and how our prize compares to theirs. To understand our suffering fully, we must now step into the invisible, yet profoundly real, prison of comparison. The fire of craving that we have just explored does not burn in a vacuum. It requires fuel, it requires oxygen. And one of the most abundant and toxic fuels the ego uses to stoke this fire is the pervasive, almost constant habit of comparison. If craving is the engine of our discontent, comparison is the steering wheel that directs it, constantly turning our attention away from our own path and onto the paths of others. It is a prison with invisible bars, a self-imposed confinement where our sense of well-being is never allowed to be absolute, but is forever chained to the perceived successes and failures of those around us. We have been taught to measure our lives with a yardstick that belongs to someone else, and in doing so, we have forgotten how to read the unique and beautiful map of our own soul. There is a simple and profound saying: often attributed to the American President Theodore Roosevelt, that perfectly encapsulates this truth. Comparison is the thief of joy. It is a thief because it enters our minds silently and steals something precious, leaving us poorer without us even realizing we've been robbed. The act of comparison creates a mental seesaw, and we are always on one end or the other, never in a state of stable, grounded peace. The first outcome is that we look at someone else and judge ourselves to be better, more successful, more intelligent, wealthier, more physically attractive. This gives the ego a momentary puff of pride, a fragile feeling of superiority. But this is not joy. It is arrogance. It is a precarious state that depends entirely on someone else remaining beneath us. It creates a subtle anxiety, a need to maintain our position, a fear that others might catch up or surpass us. This feeling of superiority is a cheap imitation of self-worth, for true self-worth needs no external validation and no comparison to exist. The far more common and far more painful outcome of comparison is that we look at others and judge ourselves to be lesser. We see their carefully curated triumphs and feel the sharp pang of our own perceived inadequacies. This is the poison of envy. Envy is more than just wanting what someone else has. It is a form of suffering that can curdle into resentment for their good fortune. It whispers a toxic story into our ear. Their happiness diminishes mine. Their success is a testament to my failure. This feeling reinforces the ego's deepest insecurity, the core belief that I am not enough. In this state, we cannot celebrate the joy of others because we see it as a personal reflection on our own lack. The entire spectrum of our experience becomes colored by what we don't have, and the genuine blessings of our own life become invisible to us. Whether we land on the side of arrogance or the side of envy, the result is the same. We are disconnected from ourselves, and we are disconnected from others. We are trapped in a lonely game of mental accounting, perpetually calculating our worth instead of simply living our lives. While this habit of comparison is as old as the human ego itself, it is found in our modern world, a tool of unprecedented power and reach. The screen in our pocket, social media has created a grand, global arena for comparison, a 24-hour spectacle that our minds are simply not evolved to handle. For millennia, we compared ourselves to a few dozen people in our immediate tribe. Now, we compare ourselves to millions. We scroll through what are essentially digital museums of curated perfection. We see the highlight reels, not the behind-the-scenes struggles. We see the perfect vacation photo, but not the stressful airport delays or the argument that happened just before the picture was taken. We see the announcement of the new job, but not the dozens of rejections that preceded it. We see the smiling couple, but not the silent tensions that exist in their relationship. Intellectually, we may know that these images are not the full reality, but on a deep emotional level, our ego processes this endless stream of triumphs as data. It stacks up all this curated evidence and presents it to us as proof of our own shortcomings. This constant exposure fuels a pervasive sense of fear of missing out, or FOMO, the feeling that everyone else is living a more exciting, more meaningful, more beautiful life than we are. It creates wildly unrealistic expectations for what a normal human life should look like, leading to chronic dissatisfaction with our own ordinary and often beautiful reality. The screen becomes a window through which we watch the world, but the glass is a distorted mirror, reflecting back a diminished version of ourselves. It is a perfect storm where the ancient human tendency to compare is fed by a technologically supercharged stream of idealized information, resulting in what many have called a modern epidemic of anxiety and depression. How then do we break free from this prison? The first step, as with all forms of inner work, is awareness. The habit of comparison is so automatic that it often operates below the level of our conscious mind. The practice of mindfulness is the act of turning on the light in this dark room. It begins with simply noticing the habit as it arises. Pay attention to the subtle shifts in your inner state as you scroll through a feed or talk with a friend. Notice that quiet pang of envy. Notice the fleeting sense of pride. Notice the critical voice that starts assessing your life in relation to theirs. When you catch it happening, there is no need for self-judgment. Don't scold yourself for comparing. Simply and gently label the activity in your mind, comparing. there is comparing happening. This simple act of naming is incredibly powerful. It creates a moment of space. It interrupts the unconscious momentum of the thought. You are no longer lost in the act of comparing. You are the awareness that is noticing the comparing. In that space lies your freedom. Once awareness has opened the door, we can introduce a powerful antidote to the poison of envy. In Buddhist teachings, this antidote is called mudita, which translates as sympathetic or altruistic joy. It is the practice of actively and intentionally cultivating joy in the happiness and good fortune of others. This is a radical reframing of the heart. Instead of viewing another success as something taken from you, you choose to view it as a net gain for the world, an increase in the total sum of happiness on the planet, and you allow yourself to participate in it. The practice can be simple. Sit quietly for a few moments and bring to mind someone you love or care for. Think of something good that has recently happened to theme a personal achievement, a happy experience, a simple moment of joy. Hold their image in your mind and genuinely wish them well. Try to feel their happiness in your own heart. Say to yourself, I am happy that you are happy. Feel the warmth of that sentiment. Once you feel comfortable with this, you can extend the practice. Bring to mind a neutral person, someone you don't know well, perhaps a colleague or an acquaintance. Think of their humanity and wish for their happiness. The final, most challenging, and most transformative step is to bring to mind someone you actively feel jealous or resentful of. This is difficult, but it is where the real work is done. Acknowledge the difficult feelings of envy, but then, as an act of will and compassion, try to wish them well. See their success as a product of their own efforts and conditions, and try to find a small space in your heart to be happy for them. This practice of mudita directly severs the root of envy. It dissolves the walls of separation and reconnects us to our shared humanity. It is the act of feeding the wolf of compassion and starving the wolf of comparison. There is an old parable about a king who had 4 white horses. The first horse was so exceptionally intelligent and well-trained that it would start to move and follow the king's command before the whip even cast a shadow upon its flank. The second horse would move only when the whip lightly touched its hair. The third horse would only move when the whip struck its flesh. And the fourth horse, the most stubborn, would only move when the pain of the whip penetrated to the very marrow of its bones. The king did not look upon these horses and say, the first horse is excellent and the other 3 are worthless. He understood that each horse represented a different capacity, a different stage of awareness. He valued the lesson that each horse provided. We are all like these 4 horses. We exist on a vast spectrum of awareness, with different strengths, different weaknesses, and different paces on our journey. To compare ourselves to another is as foolish as comparing the third horse to the first. It honors neither horse's unique nature. The wise path is to stop looking at the other horses altogether, and to instead focus on our own journey with kindness, patience, and acceptance. By pulling our attention away from the lives of others and gently placing it back on our own, we reclaim a tremendous amount of mental and emotional energy. We escape the invisible prison of comparison and begin to walk our own path with a newfound sense of dignity and peace. But the ego's restless activity is not limited to measuring itself against others in the present moment. Its favorite and most tragic pastime is to wander aimlessly through the graveyards of the past and the haunted houses of the future, preventing us from living in the only place where life ever truly exists, right here, right now. To continue our journey to freedom, we must now address this ghostly burden. We have journeyed deep into the territory of the ego. We have seen that it is a phantom, a story built on the illusion of permanence. We have seen how its insatiable craving, its tanha, keeps us chained to a cycle of wanting, and how its toxic habit of comparison steals our joy. Now, we arrive at the ego's final and most cunning strategy, the trick that underpins all its other activities, its ability to pull us out of the only time that truly exists. The ego is a master time traveler. It lives almost exclusively in the ghostly realms of the past and the imaginary landscapes of the future, convincing us that life is happening anywhere but right here, in the vibrant, pulsating reality of the present moment. The present moment is the only ground we ever have to stand on, the only point where life unfolds. Yet we spend most of our lives as fugitives from it, and in this exile, we find the roots of our deepest anxieties. Let us first turn our attention to the past. What is the past? It is not a real place. You cannot book a flight to yesterday. The past exists only as a collection of traces within our own mind's flickering memories, neural pathways, emotional echoes. It is like a photograph album, a collection of faded images that we can look at, but can never re-enter. Yet, the ego treats this phantom realm as a solid reality, a place to be endlessly revisited, relitigated, and regretted. It drags the past into the present like a heavy sack of stones, forcing us to carry a burden that serves no purpose but to exhaust us. This burden takes several forms. The first is regret. The ego replays our past mistakes on an endless loop. It is a cruel prosecutor, constantly reminding us of our failures, our foolish words, our missed opportunities. It weaves these memories into a narrative of shame and guilt, whispering, "You should have done better. You are flawed. You are not good enough." We become haunted by the ghosts of our former selves, unable to forgive and move on, trapped in a story of inadequacy that is perpetually reinforced by these old memories. The second form is resentment. The ego clings tightly to the grievances of the past, to the stories of how we were wronged, betrayed, or treated unfairly. It polishes these memories like dark jewels, not to heal from them, but to use them as evidence in the ongoing trial of life. By casting others as permanent villains, the ego gets to play the role of the righteous victim, a role that gives it a powerful, albeit painful, sense of identity. This clinging to old hurts is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The only one who suffers is us. Even pleasant memories can become a trap. The ego can get lost in nostalgia, a sentimental longing for the good old days. It creates a golden-hued, idealized version of the past and then compares the present unfavorably to it. Life was so much simpler then. I was so much happier then. This prevents us from seeing and appreciating the blessings of the life we have right now. Whether we are bound by the chains of regret or lost in the mists of nostalgia, the mechanism is the same. We are allowing the dead past to colonize the living present. The suffering does not come from the events of the past themselves. They are over. The suffering comes from our constant mental resuscitation of them, here and now. If the past is a ghost, the future is a mirage. It has even less substance than the past. The future is pure imagination, a mental projection, a stream of what-ifs. It does not exist. It has never existed. Yet, we invest a tremendous amount of our life energy in this phantom realm. The ego's engagement with the future is primarily driven by fear, manifesting as anxiety and worry. The mind endlessly rehearses potential disasters. What if I fail the presentation? What if I get sick? What if my partner leaves me? What if I can't pay the bills? Each of these thoughts creates a real physiological stress response in our bodies. Our heart rate increases, our muscles tense, our breathing becomes shallow. We are living through a catastrophe that has not happened and may never happen. As the saying goes, we are paying interest on a debt we may not even owe. This constant state of low-grade, forward-looking fear is the very definition of modern anxiety. The other way the ego engages with the future is through fantasy. It projects our salvation onto a future event. I will finally be happy when I get that promotion. I lose 20 pounds. I find the perfect partner. I retire. This is a condition many have called destination addiction. It turns the present moment into nothing more than a means to an end, a tedious stepping stone to be endured on the way to a future paradise. But what happens when we reach that destination? As we have seen, the pleasure is fleeting, and the ego simply sets up a new destination further down the road. Okay, I got the promotion, but I'll be truly happy when I'm the CEO. Life becomes a perpetual waiting room, and we miss the entirety of our actual existence, which is always and only now. Both anxiety about the future and fantasy about the future are two sides of the same coin. They are a fundamental refusal to be where we are. The escape from these phantom worlds of past and future does not lie in trying to violently stop our thoughts, an impossible and frustrating task. The escape lies in the gentle but radical art of arriving in the present moment. This is the core practice of mindfulness. It is the simple, profound act of anchoring our awareness in the naked reality of the here and now. The primary anchor, the one that is always with us, is the breath. The breath is never in the past or the future. It is always happening now. When you find your mind lost in a spiral of worry about tomorrow, or caught in a loop of regret about yesterday, you can gently, without judgment, guide your attention back to the simple, physical sensation of the breath entering your body and the breath leaving your body. Each time you do this, you are stepping out of the stream of time and onto the solid ground of the present. Another powerful way to ground yourself is to engage your senses. Your thoughts can time travel, but your senses cannot. They report only on what is happening right now. Try this simple practice. Wherever you are, pause and notice 5 distinct things you can see. Don't just name them. Really see their color, their shape, their texture. Then, notice 4 things you can feel. The pressure of the chair against your back, the texture of your clothes against your skin, the temperature of the air, the feeling of your feet on the floor. Then, listen for 3 things you can hear, sounds near and far. Then, notice 2 things you can smell. And finally, notice 1 thing you can taste, even if it's just the neutral taste of your own mouth. In less than a minute, this practice pulls your awareness out of the chaotic world of abstract thought and plants it firmly in the soil of direct, sensory experience. You can transform any mundane activity into a practice of presence. When you wash the dishes, feel the warmth of the water and the smoothness of the plates. When you drink a cup of tea, feel the heat of the cup, see the steam rising, smell its fragrance, and taste each sip as if it were the first and last you will ever taste. This is the art of living deeply. There is a story of a Zen master who was walking alongside a river. He saw a scorpion that had fallen in and was struggling, about to drown. The master decided to save it. He reached out his hand, and as he scooped it up, the scorpion stung him. In pain, he instinctively dropped the scorpion back into the water. But then, seeing it still struggling, he reached down to try again. A man who was watching from the riverbank shouted, "You fool, it just stung you. Why do you keep trying to save it? It will only sting you again." The master, never taking his eyes off the struggling creature, replied, "It is the nature of a scorpion to sting. It is the nature of a human to save. Why should I give up my nature simply because the scorpion is being true to its own?" This master's action was born purely of the present moment. It was not dictated by the memory of past pain, nor was it inhibited by the fear of future pain. It was a clear, compassionate response to the immediate reality in front of him. A being was suffering, and he had the capacity to help. This is the profound freedom and clarity that arises from a mind that is not burdened by the weight of time. It is a mind that can respond to life with wisdom and compassion, rather than reacting from old conditioning and future fears. We have now completed our diagnostic journey. We have explored the architecture of the ego, this phantom self that is the source of our disquiet. We have seen that it is a story, not a substance. We have seen that it is built on the lie of permanence, fueled by the fire of craving, inflamed by the poison of comparison, and that it lives in the ghostly realms of past and future. We have mapped the prison in its entirety. And now, having understood the lock, it is time to be introduced to the key. It is time to step out of the shadows of the self and into the light of a greater truth. It is time for the great unraveling, to explore the most profound, the most challenging, and the most liberating reality offered by this ancient wisdom, the truth of no self. We stand now at the threshold of the most profound, most challenging, and ultimately most liberating insight in this entire journey of discovery. We have meticulously mapped the prison of the ego, examining its every corner, from its foundation of impermanence to its walls of craving and comparison, and its ceaseless pacing through the corridors of past and future. We have understood the architecture of our own suffering, and now we are handed the key. This key is the wisdom of anatta, or no self. At first, this concept can be deeply unsettling. The phrase, no self, might sound like a denial of our very existence, a plunge into a cold, nihilistic void. It can feel like a personal threat. The ego, the storyteller in our head, immediately rises up in protest. What do you mean, no self? I am here. I am thinking. I am feeling. I am listening to these words right now. This reaction is completely natural. So let us be perfectly clear from the outset. Anatta does not mean that you do not exist. It does not mean that you are nothing. It is not an argument for annihilation. Rather, it is a precise and profound insight into the nature of your existence. It suggests that if you conduct a deep and honest investigation, you will find that there is no fixed, solid, independent, unchanging self or soul residing somewhere at the core of your being. What you will find instead is something far more dynamic, more mysterious, and more interconnected. This is the great unraveling, the gentle untying of the tight, painful knot we call me. To begin this investigation, let us turn to one of the most famous dialogues in Buddhist literature, a conversation that took place over 2,000 years ago between a Buddhist sage named Nagasena and the curious Greco-Bactrian king, Milinda. The king, trained in the logic of the Greeks, wished to pin down the elusive nature of the self. He approached Nagasena and asked his name. The sage replied that he was known as Nagasena, but that this was merely a convenient name, a designation. There is, he said, no permanent person to be found here. The king was perplexed and challenged him with a brilliant analogy. Pointing to his royal chariot, he asked, "Reverend sir, is the chariot the pole? Is it the axle? Is it the wheels, or the frame, or the reins, or the whip?" To each question, Nagasena calmly answered, "No, your majesty." The king then asked, "Then is the chariot all of these parts combined?" Again, Nagasena replied, "Number." Finally, the king asked, "Then is the chariot something separate from all of its parts?" And again, the answer was, "Number." Cornered by his own logic, the king triumphantly declared, "Then, Reverend sir, you are lying. There is no such thing as a chariot." But Nagasena gently turned the question back on the king, forcing him to concede that chariot is simply the conventional name one gives to the collection of these parts, assembled and functioning in a particular way. It is a useful label, but there is no intrinsic chariotness to be found, no chariot soul that exists independently of its components. Then, with perfect precision, Nagasena applied this same logic to himself. He said, "Just as chariot is a designation for the collection of its parts, so Nagasena is a designation for the processes of my mind and body. But if you look for a permanent, unchanging Nagasena who owns this mind and body, you will not find one." This is the starting point of our investigation. The Buddha himself, in his own quest for enlightenment, did exactly this. He sat down and looked deeply into his own being, searching for this elusive self. He did not find one. Instead, he discovered that what we call a person is a dynamic, flowing process, a temporary confluence of 5 distinct, ever-changing elements. These are known as the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. Let us, for a moment, be like the Buddha and look for ourself in each of them. First, there is form, rupa. This is our physical body, and the entire material world is experienced through our sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and physical sensations. Is the self in our body? If so, where? Is it in your hand? If you were to lose your hand, would you be any less you? Is it your hair, which you can cut? Is it in your internal organs? Our bodies are in a state of constant flux, as we have seen. Cells are dying and being replaced by the million. The body you have today is not the body you had 7 years ago, nor the one you will have 7 years from now. It is a flowing river of matter. So, a permanent, unchanging self cannot be found here. Second, there is feeling, Vedana. This refers to the raw sensory tone of our experience, which can be categorized into 3 types: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It is the simple sting of a burn before we label it pain, or the simple warmth of the sun before we label it pleasure. These feelings are like bubbles on the surface of water. They arise. They exist for a fleeting moment, and then they vanish. They are completely dependent on conditions. Can this parade of transient feelings be the permanent self? Clearly not. Third, there is perception, sana. This is the mind's faculty for recognizing, identifying, and labeling. When light hits our retina and our mind says blue, that is perception. When sound waves hit our eardrum and our mind says car, that is perception. It is the process that creates our conceptual map of the world. But are our perceptions a stable self? Our perceptions are conditioned by our language, our culture, our past experiences. A trained musician perceives subtleties in a piece of music that an untrained ear does not. Perception is a learned, changing process, not a solid entity. So, the self cannot be found here either. Fourth, there are the mental formations, sankhara. This is a broad and crucial category that includes all of our volitional activities, thoughts, opinions, beliefs, judgments, moods, habits, and intentions. This is the realm of the storyteller, the architect of anxiety we have been exploring. This is the chattering, scheming, worrying, desiring part of the mind. It is a chaotic whirlwind of mental events, a constant stream of activity. To look for a stable, singular self in this storm of thoughts and impulses is like trying to find a single, stationary drop of water in the middle of a raging waterfall. It is impossible. Finally, there is consciousness, vijnana. This is the fundamental quality of awareness, the faculty of knowing that allows us to experience all the other aggregates. We have eye consciousness, which knows sights, ear consciousness, which knows sounds, mind consciousness, which knows thoughts. One might be tempted to say, aha, this consciousness is the self. It is the watcher, the observer behind it all. But Buddhist analysis reveals that consciousness is not a monolithic, independent entity. It is also a dependent, flickering process. It only arises when a sense organ and a sense object come together. Eye consciousness does not exist on its own. It arises only when an eye meets a form. It is more like the light that illuminates a room. It has no substance of its own and depends entirely on the lamp and the electricity. It is not a permanent knower, but the very act of knowing itself, arising and passing away with each moment of experience. So, where is the self? We have looked in the body, in our feelings, in our perceptions, in our thoughts, and in our consciousness itself. And we cannot find a static, independent entity to call me or mine. What we call the self is like the chariotid is a convenient name for the temporary coming together of these five flowing processes. It is a pattern, not a thing. This leads us to a profound shift in understanding. The self is not a noun, it is a verb. I am not an object, I am an event. It is the ongoing dynamic process of seeing, hearing, thinking, and feeling. It is the universe in the act of experiencing itself through this particular collection of mind-body processes. You are not the wave. You are the ocean in the act of waving. You are not the light bulb. You are the flowing energy of lighting. What is the result of seeing this truth, not just intellectually but as a felt reality? It is the great liberation, the entire, exhausting, lifelong project of the ego, project of defending, protecting, promoting, and aggrandizing the self, is suddenly revealed to be based on a case of mistaken identity. It's as if you have spent your entire life as the anxious guardian of a royal treasure chest, only to one day open it and find that it has always been empty. If there is no solid, separate self, then who is there to be insulted? What core me is there to fail? What permanent entity is there to be threatened by change, aging, and death? The entire burden of being me, with all its attendant fears and insecurities, simply begins to dissolve. The armor we have been wearing is so heavy, and to realize we can simply take it off brings a sense of lightness and freedom that is almost unimaginable. We have unraveled the knot. We have taken apart the chariot and found no charioteer. We have analyzed the self and found only a set of flowing, interconnected processes. The solid rock we thought we were standing on has dissolved into a flowing current. This naturally brings us to a new question. If I am not a static thing, not a stone, then what am I? How can I live with this new, fluid understanding of my own being? To grasp this reality, we must leave the dusty workshop of the chariot maker and stand on the banks of an ever-flowing river. We have stood with King Milinda and the sage Nagasena and watched as the chariot of the self was dismantled before our very eyes. We have examined its components, our body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, and found no permanent, solid driver in the seat. The self we thought was a solid thing has revealed itself to be a dynamic, interdependent process. This intellectual understanding is the key, but it is not the door. To walk through the door into a new way of living, we need more than analysis. We need a new way of seeing, a new metaphor to live by. We must trade the old, flawed image of ourselves for a new one that is more aligned with reality. The old image, the one that causes us so much pain, is that of a stone. The new image, the one that offers us freedom, is that of a river. Imagine a stone lying in the bed of a great river. The stone has a distinct identity. It has a fixed shape, a certain weight, a defined boundary that separates it from everything else. It believes its security lies in its solidity, its unchanging nature. This stone is the ego self. It sees itself as a separate, independent entity navigating the world. And what is its relationship with the river of life? It is one of constant resistance. The current pushes against it, and the stone braces itself, trying to hold its ground. The water, representing the flow of events, the ceaseless change of impermanence, rushes over and around it. Over time, the constant friction wears the stone down, smoothing its sharp edges, eroding its very substance. The stone's entire existence is a struggle against the flow. It is battered by the currents of loss, ground down by the sands of time, and often feels stuck, wedged between other rocks, unable to move. This is the life of the ego. It is a life of bracing, resisting, and struggling against the natural, unstoppable flow of reality. The anxiety we feel is the sound of the water grinding against the stone. The depression we feel is the heavy, stuck feeling of being wedged in the riverbed. It is a life defined by friction. Now, shift your perspective. Cease to be the stone and become the river itself. What is the nature of the river? Its identity is not in its shape, for it has no fixed shape. Its identity is in its movement, its very flowingness. It is never the same from one moment to the next. It is constantly letting go, relinquishing the part of the riverbed it has just passed, and constantly embracing the new terrain that lies ahead. The river does not fight obstacles in its path. When it meets a great boulder challenge, a loss, a difficulty, it does not waste its energy trying to smash it. It yields. It flows around it, over it, or through its cracks, always finding a way forward. Its power lies not in its rigidity, but in its supreme adaptability. The river understands that the journey is the destination. Its purpose is not to arrive at the ocean, but to be fully engaged in the process of flowing towards it. This is the mind that has understood no self. It is a mind that has let go of the need for a fixed identity. It is fluid, resilient, and open. It doesn't see life's inevitable changes as personal threats, but as the natural unfolding of the landscape. It is not battered by life. It is in a dance with life. When you stop identifying as the separate, solid stone and begin to experience yourself as the flowing, connected river, the entire dynamic of your life changes. The struggle ceases. The constant, exhausting effort of resisting reality is surrendered. And in this surrender, a new kind of strength is discovered, the powerful, persistent, and yielding strength of water. But you might ask, this sounds peaceful, but my inner life is not a calm, flowing river. It is a raging torrent. It is full of crashing waves of anger, deep, dark eddies of sadness, and chaotic, churning rapids of anxiety. If I am the river, what do I do with all this turmoil? This is a crucial question, and it leads to a vital refinement of the metaphor. You are not just the surface of the river, you are its entire depth. The thoughts, feelings, and sensations that arise within you are like the activity on the river's surface. A strong wind of conflict can whip up waves of anger. A hidden rock of past trauma can create a swirling eddy of grief. These are real phenomena, but they are temporary. They are disturbances in the water, but they are not the water itself. The mistake of the ego, the stone mind, is to identify completely with the wave. When a wave of anger arises, it says, I am angry. It becomes the wave, losing itself in its turbulent energy, believing that this temporary disturbance is its entire identity. It is tossed and turned, completely at the mercy of the surface conditions. The wisdom of the river mind is to realize that you are the vast, deep body of water that contains the waves. You are the profound current flowing beneath the surface turmoil. You can witness the wave of anger arise. You can feel its energy without being consumed by it. And you can watch as it inevitably loses its form and subsides back into the great river that you are. This creates a profound sense of inner stability, a quiet depth that is unshaken by the passing weather on the surface. You can be the calm in the midst of your own storm. There is a simple Zen story that captures this spirit of acceptance. A master gathered his students in a clearing. He took a long stick and, with a slow, deliberate motion, drew a large circle in the soft earth. He then turned to his students and said, "Your life, in its totality, everything that has ever happened to you, everything that is happening now, and everything that will ever happen to you is inside this circle. Your body, your mind, your joy, your pain, your successes, your failures, they are all contained within this circle. The spiritual practice is very simple. Learn to live peacefully inside this circle. Do not waste a single moment of your precious life trying to step outside of it, wishing you had a different circle, complaining about the shape of this one, or trying to erase a part of it you do not like. The freedom you seek is not in a different circle. It is in the total, unconditional acceptance of this one. This is the essence of going with the flow. It is not a passive resignation. It is an active, courageous, and deeply intelligent embrace of the life that is yours. The river does not complain about its banks. It flows within them. To stop fighting your circle, to stop resisting your flow, is to find a peace that is not dependent on external conditions. So, we must ask ourselves, are we living as the stone or as the river? Are we bracing against the currents of life, feeling worn down and stuck? Or are we learning to flow with them, finding our strength in our ability to yield and adapt? To make this shift is to move from a life of struggle to a life of grace. It is to realize that you are not a separate object moving through the universe. You are the universe itself in the process of flowing, of experiencing, of becoming. We have used this powerful metaphor of the river to feel our way into this new identity. But what is this river truly made of? What is this water that can be both calm and turbulent, deep and shallow? To understand our nature at an even more fundamental level, we must now investigate the very substance of all our experience, the water of the river itself, the mysterious and luminous nature of consciousness. We have journeyed from the solid, separate stone of the ego to the fluid, dynamic river of our true nature. We have begun to feel that we are not a fixed thing, but a flowing process. But this raises a deeper question. What is the very substance of this river? What is this water that is the medium for all our experience? The answer is consciousness. But as soon as we use that word, the ego rushes in to claim it, to say, my consciousness, as if it were a possession. To see its true nature, we must release our grip on it and use a new metaphor, one that speaks of space, of clarity, and of boundless acceptance. We must stop looking at the river and start looking at the sky. Imagine, for a moment, the sky. What are its essential qualities? The sky is vast. It is open and without limits. It is always present, holding everything within it, from the sun and moon to the most distant stars. And most importantly, the sky is fundamentally untouched and unstained by whatever happens within it. A brilliant, fiery sunset does not permanently color the sky. A violent thunderstorm with crashing thunder and jagged lightning does not tear or damage the sky. A thick, suffocating fog does not smother the sky. The weather changes, but the sky's essential nature, its vast, accommodating presence remains constant. It is inherently peaceful. This sky is a perfect metaphor for the nature of consciousness itself. Pure awareness, the fundamental knowing quality of your mind, is just like the sky. It is the silent, open space in which every single one of your experiences takes place. It is the context, not the content. It is the knowing presence that is aware of the words on this page, the sounds in the room, the feeling of your body sitting, and the thoughts moving through your mind. And just like the sky, this fundamental awareness is never harmed by the content of your experience. A painful memory may arise in your awareness, but it does not damage the awareness itself. A surge of anger may pass through your mind, but it does not burn the consciousness that knows it. At your very core, there is a spacious, clear, and undamaged presence that has been with you your entire life. This is a profoundly healing realization. It means that no matter what storms you have weathered in your life, the sky of your true nature remains pristine and whole. Now, let us consider the clouds. The clouds are the weather of the mind. They are the contents of our consciousness. Our thoughts, our emotions, our memories, our plans, our judgments, these are the clouds. Like the clouds in the sky, they are endlessly varied. Some are bright, fluffy, and pleasant, like happy thoughts or feelings of joy. Others are dark and menacing, like thoughts of fear, jealousy, or self-criticism. Some are a thick, gray blanket of sadness that seems to obscure all light. Others are thin and wispy, like fleeting ideas or faint memories that drift by almost unnoticed. And just like the clouds in the sky, all of these mental events are impermanent. They gather, they take a certain shape for a while. They are moved by unseen winds, and eventually, they dissolve and disappear, making way for new clouds. They are not solid things. They are temporary formations appearing in the vast space of the sky. Here we arrive at the root of our psychological suffering, the fundamental error in perception that traps us. We mistake ourselves for the clouds. When a dark storm cloud of anger gathers in our mind, we point to it and say, "I am angry." We shrink our identity from the vast, open sky to the small, turbulent, and temporary weather pattern. We forget that we are the sky that contains the storm. We believe we are the storm. And so, we are tossed and turned by its winds, soaked by its rain, and frightened by its lightning. When a thick fog of depression rolls in, we believe, "I am depressed." We forget the clear blue sky that continues to exist above the fog, and we feel lost, hopeless, and suffocated by the limited visibility of our current mental state. By identifying with these passing clouds, we condemn ourselves to a life of meteorological distress, completely at the mercy of our ever-changing inner weather. The path to freedom, then, is a radical shift in identification. It is the practice of becoming a cloud watcher. It is learning to rest as the sky and simply observe the weather of the mind as it passes through. You can do this right now. Allow your awareness to feel spacious, like the open sky. And as a thought arises, simply notice it. See it as a cloud floating into your field of awareness. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to judge the cloud. There are no good clouds or bad clouds in the sky. There is just weather. Similarly, you don't have to judge yourself for having an anxious thought or a selfish impulse. Just note it. Ah, a fear cloud. Ah, a planning cloud. You don't have to grab onto the clouds. When a beautiful, fluffy cloud of happiness floats by, enjoy its presence, but don't try to catch it and hold it in place. It will pass, and that's okay. More clouds will come. And most importantly, you don't have to push the clouds away. When a dark storm cloud appears, the instinct is to fight it, to try to dissipate it with force. But you cannot punch a cloud. The attempt only creates more struggle. The practice is to allow it to be there. Give the storm cloud space. Watch it with a gentle, non-judgmental curiosity. See its texture, its shape, its energy, and you will find that if you simply allow it to be, without feeding it with more angry thoughts, it will eventually exhaust its energy and pass on its own, just as all storms do. This practice of resting as the sky and watching the clouds creates a profound sense of inner freedom. You realize that you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions. You are the silent, loving awareness in which they all arise and pass away. There is a story about a man who spent his entire life searching for peace. He traveled from country to country, visiting famous monasteries, sitting at the feet of renowned gurus, and studying all the sacred scriptures. But no matter what he did, his mind remained a turbulent sea of anxiety. Finally, old and exhausted, he heard of a wise hermit who lived alone in a remote mountain cave. He made the arduous journey and poured out his story. "I have done everything," the man said, "but I cannot find peace. Can you please give it to me?" The old hermit looked at him with kind eyes and said, "I cannot give you peace, but I will ask you to do one thing. For the next hour, I want you to sit here on this rock. I want you to stop searching for peace. Stop trying to achieve it. Stop trying to create it. Stop thinking about it. For 1 hour, just stop." The man, having no other options, agreed. He sat on the rock and, for the first time in his life, he let go of his quest. He stopped striving. He just sat. He watched the clouds drift across the actual sky. He felt the breeze on his skin. He listened to the sound of the birds. He watched the clouds of his own thoughts come and go without chasing after them. And as the hour passed, a strange and wonderful thing happened. In the absence of his frantic searching, he began to notice a quiet, deep, and profound stillness that had been there all along. The peace he had been desperately seeking all over the world was right there, in the very fabric of his own being, obscured only by the noise of his relentless search. This is the great secret. Peace is not a special cloud that we must someday acquire. Peace is the nature of the sky. It is our default setting. It is the silence that is always present underneath the noise. It is the stillness that is always present beneath the movement. By learning to identify with the sky of awareness rather than the passing clouds of our experience, we are not creating peace. We are simply returning to the peace that we always were and always will be. We have seen now how the contents of our mind are interconnected, all held within the same vast space of consciousness. But this principle of interconnectedness does not stop at the boundary of our own skin. It extends outward to encompass the entire universe. To take the next step in our journey, we must now see that nothing, not even our own self, exists in isolation. We have rested in the vast, open sky of consciousness, learning to see our thoughts and feelings as passing clouds. We have discovered an inner refuge of peace that is untouched by the weather of our minds. Now, our journey asks us to expand our vision, to look beyond the boundaries of our own skin and see that this principle of interconnectedness is not just a psychological truth, but the fundamental law of the entire cosmos. We are about to explore the most radical implication of no self, an insight that dissolves the very distinction between ourself and the world. This is the teaching of dependent origination, or in the ancient Pali language, Paticcasamuppada. It can be summarized in a simple, profound statement. This is, because that is. This is not, because that is not. This arises, because that arises. In other words, nothing, absolutely nothing exists in isolation. Everything is connected to everything else in a vast, intricate, and seamless web of cause and effect. The illusion of a separate self is perhaps the most powerful and persistent illusion that our minds create. We feel a distinct boundary at our skin. We feel that I am in here, and the rest of the world is out there. But a deep look reveals this boundary to be a convenient fiction, not a fundamental reality. Let us conduct a simple investigation. Who are you, really, without everything you consider to be other? Let's start with your physical body. You are breathing, but you are not creating the air. The air is a gift from the trees, the plankton, the entire planetary atmosphere. It flows into you, becomes part of you for a moment, and then you release it to be used by others. You are drinking water that was once a cloud, once part of an ocean, once inside another living being. The food you eat is transformed sunlight, earth, and water. Your body is not a self-contained object. It is a temporary manifestation of the planet itself. You are quite literally eating, drinking, and breathing the universe. Now, consider your mind. The very language you use to think your most private thoughts was taught to you by your parents, your teachers, your community. The ideas, beliefs, opinions, and values that you hold so dear and consider to be yours have been shaped by countless interactions with books, conversations, culture, and experience. Your personality itself is a response to your upbringing and your environment. Even your sense of being a unique individual is dependent on the existence of other individuals to compare yourself to. Stretch your mind back in time. You exist because your parents existed, and they existed because their parents existed, and so on, in an unbroken chain of life, stretching back through unimaginable eons. You are the present, temporary expression of an immense ancestral river. When you look deeply, the line between self and other becomes blurry, and eventually, it vanishes altogether. There is a magnificent and ancient metaphor from the Hindu and Buddhist traditions that helps us visualize this profound reality. It is called the jewel net of the god Indra. Imagine a vast, cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. At every single point where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, multifaceted, perfectly polished jewel. The net is structured in such a way that the surface of every single jewel reflects every other jewel in the entire, infinite net. But it is even more intricate than that. Each of the countless reflections in a single jewel also contains the reflection of all the other jewels. And within those reflections, The process is repeated again and again, to infinity. This net is the universe. Each jewel is an individual being, or a single atom, or a single thought. The message is breathtakingly beautiful. Every part of the universe contains, and is contained by, the whole. Your own individual existence is a reflection of the entire cosmos, and the entire cosmos is reflected in you. Nothing is separate. To touch one jewel is to cause the entire net to shimmer and tremble. Your smallest action, your quietest thought, sends ripples out through this infinite web of interconnection. The idea that you are a lonely, isolated individual is impossible in such a universe. You are a focal point where the entire cosmos converges and becomes conscious of itself. The late Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, who gave us the beautiful word interbeing to describe this reality, offered a simple and powerful meditation to help us experience this directly. He invited us to look deeply at a single sheet of paper. On the surface, a sheet of paper is just a sheet of paper, but if we look with the eyes of wisdom, we can see things very differently. We can see a cloud floating in the paper. Why? Because without a cloud, there is no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow, and without trees, we cannot make paper. So the cloud is essential for the paper's existence. If we look further, we can see the sunshine. The sunshine was necessary for the tree to perform photosynthesis and grow strong. So the sun is in the paper. And if we keep looking, we can see the logger who cut the tree, and we can see his parents who gave birth to him. We can see the wheat that made the bread he ate for breakfast, and the field where the wheat grew. We can see the mining company that made the steel for his saw. We can see the entire economy, the earth, the geological history, all present, right here, in this humble sheet of paper. The conclusion is inescapable. The sheet of paper cannot exist by itself. It can only interbe with all the things we consider to be not paper. If we were to return the sunshine to the sun, the cloud to the sky, the logger to his parents, the earth to the ground, the sheet of paper would have no way to exist. It is the same for us. You cannot be, by yourself, alone. You are with your parents, your ancestors, the air, the water, the food, the culture, the language, and the entire web of life. The separate self is a myth. What happens in the heart when this insight moves from a beautiful idea to a felt reality? The entire foundation of our suffering begins to crumble. The ego, which is built on the story of separation, begins to lose its power. The motivations of greed, selfishness, and hatred, which all depend on a strong sense of me versus them, are seen to be based on a profound misunderstanding. In their place, two qualities naturally and effortlessly arise: compassion and responsibility. Compassion, or karuna, ceases to be a sentimental feeling of pity for someone else's misfortune. It becomes a deeply logical and visceral response to reality. If you and I are, then your suffering is not entirely separate from my suffering. The pain you feel sends a tremor through the jewel net that I am also a part of. The joy you feel adds to the light that is reflected in my own being. Helping you is no longer a selfless act. It is an act of wisdom, an act of healing, the larger whole of which I am an inseparable part. It is like my left hand helping my right hand when it is injured. It does so instinctively, without any thought of reward, because both are part of the same body. This understanding also awakens a boundless sense of responsibility. When we truly feel that we are not separate from the world, then harming the world is harming ourselves. The pollution we dump into the rivers is the poison we will one day drink. The violence and hatred we put out into the world creates a world of violence and hatred for us to live in. The destruction of a rainforest in a distant country is the destruction of the lungs of the planet that provides the very air we breathe. Our personal well-being becomes completely and inextricably linked to the well-being of all beings, human and non-human alike. The illusion of separation has allowed us to act with recklessness. The wisdom of interbeing calls us to act with care, with reverence, and with love. We have now expanded our view from the individual mind to the cosmic web. We have seen that the separate self, the isolated jewel, is a profound illusion, and yet there is still one lingering question. If there is no separate, solid self, then who or what is this voice in my head? What is this constant narrator, that is always telling the story of me, my problems, my achievements, my life. To find the deep silence that lies beneath all this noise, we must now learn how to gently and skillfully disengage from this tireless inner storyteller. We must learn the wisdom of the empty boat. We have journeyed to the furthest reaches of the cosmos, seeing ourselves reflected in the infinite jewel net of inner being. We have looked at a simple sheet of paper and found the entire universe within it. The intellectual truth is now laid bare. The separate self is an illusion. We are not islands. We are a seamless part of a vast, interconnected whole. And yet, even with this profound understanding, we are still faced with a deeply intimate and persistent contradiction. There is a voice in our head, a constant companion, that speaks as if this were not true at all. It is the voice of the separate self. It is the narrator of the story of me, the ghost in the machine that tirelessly maintains the illusion we have worked so hard to see through. This inner narrator, this voice in the head, is the ego's most tangible and constant manifestation. If you pause for just a moment and listen, you will hear it. It is the voice that is currently judging these words, wondering what will be said next. It is the voice that is already thinking about what you need to do after this, planning your evening, or worrying about a conversation you have to have tomorrow. It is the voice that is replaying a mistake you made last week, or rehearsing a clever remark you wish you had made. It is a ceaseless stream of commentary, criticism, speculation, and narration. It is the storyteller, and you are its captive audience of one. This voice is the ultimate activity of the ego, its primary tool for self-preservation. Every thought that begins with I, me, or my is a brick in the wall of separation. I like this. I don't like that. My problems are so overwhelming. What will happen to me? This inner monologue creates a constant sense of a central character, a protagonist, around whom the entire drama of life revolves. It takes the neutral, raw data of reality and immediately spins it into a personal story. A neutral event, like rain, becomes, "The rain is ruining my day." A comment from a colleague becomes a chapter in the story of how people don't respect me. This narrator is a master of creating unnecessary drama. It thrives on conflict, on problems, on being right. It is the source of the endless internal chatter that drains our energy and robs us of our peace. To find true inner silence, we must learn to see this narrator for what it truly is. There is a beautiful and clarifying parable from the ancient Taoist sage, Zhuangzi, that offers us the key. Imagine you are rowing a small boat across a river on a misty morning. The world is quiet and still. Suddenly, out of the fog, another boat appears and collides forcefully with yours. Immediately, you are filled with anger. You stand up, ready to shout at the careless person who has so rudely interrupted your peace. You are ready to lecture them on their incompetence, to demand an apology. Your mind is filled with a story about the other, the one who did this to me. But as you look closer, you see that there is no one in the other boat. It is an empty boat, adrift on the current, carried by the whim of the wind and water. What happens to your anger in that moment of seeing? It vanishes. It has nowhere to land. You cannot be angry at an empty boat. Your entire emotional reaction was not caused by the physical collision, but by the story you instantly created about a person, an intention, a culprit. Without that story, there is only the simple reality of the situation. Two boats have drifted into each other. You simply push the empty boat away with your oar and continue on your journey, your peace of mind completely intact. Zhuangzi's profound conclusion is this: he who can empty his own boat while crossing the river of the world will not be opposed by anyone. The empty boat is a metaphor for a life free from the reactive ego. And the crucial insight for our inner world is this: the voice in your head, the narrator who criticizes you, who worries incessantly, who judges others, that voice is an empty boat. It seems to be driven by a conscious, intelligent, and often malicious pilot, but it is not. It is driftwood. It is a collection of old habits, conditioned fears, and memorized opinions, adrift on the currents of your consciousness. When you get angry at yourself or feel despair because of your own negative thoughts, you are shouting at an empty boat. So, what is the practice? It is not to fight the voice. To argue with the narrator is to give it reality. To try to violently silence it is to engage it in a battle it will always win. because the you who is fighting is the narrator itself. The practice is far more subtle and far more powerful. It is to change your relationship to the voice. It is to shift from being the thinker of the thoughts to being the awareness that listens to the thoughts. You step back and give the voice space. You listen to your own internal monologue with the same detached curiosity you might use to listen to the sound of traffic outside your window or a radio playing softly in another room. When the voice arises and says, "I'll never be able to handle this. I am going to fail," instead of being swept away by its drama, you can simply notice it. You can say to yourself, there is the voice of fear. There is a thought about failure. Notice its tone. Is it whining? Is it aggressive? Notice its texture. Does it feel heavy or sharp? You treat the thought not as a factual report about reality, but as an impersonal mental event, a piece of weather passing through the sky of your mind. In that moment of mindful observation, a space is created. The thought is over there, and the awareness that notices the thought is over here. The thought is an object. You are the subject. And in that space, the thought loses its hypnotic power. It can no longer command your belief. It is just an empty boat drifting by. You can see it, acknowledge it, and let it pass without climbing aboard. When you begin this practice, you may be shocked at the sheer volume and negativity of the inner chatter. This is normal. The ego is a creature of habit, and it will not go quietly. But as you persist in simply observing without judgment, something remarkable begins to happen. The ego thrives on two things: your belief in it and your resistance to it. When you stop providing it with either, it is like a fire that is deprived of fuel and oxygen. It begins to quiet down. The voice may not disappear entirely, but its compulsive, frantic nature begins to subside. The periods of inner silence grow longer and deeper. And what do we find in this silence? What is left when the constant commentary finally takes a rest? We discover a state of being that is always present, but was simply drowned out by the noise. It is a deep, profound, and intelligent stillness. It is a state of pure presence. In this silence, our perception of the world becomes incredibly clear and direct. We are no longer experiencing life through the thick, distorted filter of the ego's judgments, opinions, and fears. We are experiencing things as they are. The taste of food becomes more vibrant. The beauty of a flower becomes more poignant. We can listen to another person with our full attention, without our own narrator interrupting to formulate a response. This is the peace that surpasses all understanding, because it is not a peace that is thought about, but a peace that is felt when thinking subsides. We have learned to see our own inner narrator for what it is: an empty boat, full of noise and fury, signifying nothing. By learning to listen to this voice as a neutral observer, rather than embodying it as our truth, we find the deep underlying silence that is our true home. This practice of disidentification naturally brings about a subtle but powerful shift in the very structure of our perception and our language. We begin to move away from the possessive, egocentric grammar of "I am this" or "I am that," and toward the more spacious, observational, and truthful language of "there is this" or "there is that." This is the next step on our path to freedom. We have learned to see the chattering voice in our heads for what it is: an empty boat, a collection of conditioned thoughts adrift on the currents of consciousness. By stepping back and becoming the listener, we have discovered a silence that was always there, beneath the noise. This practice of observation naturally leads us to the next stage of our unraveling. A shift so subtle it can seem insignificant, yet so powerful it can fundamentally restructure our entire experience of life. It is a shift in grammar. It is the practice of consciously changing the language we use to describe our inner world, moving from the solid, definitive statement of "I am" to the spacious, observational statement of "there is." This is not a mere word game. It is the difference between being the prisoner and being the witness. The grammar of the ego is the grammar of identity. Its favorite and most potent verb is the verb to be. I am, you are, it is. This verb creates an equation. It takes the vast, fluid, and mysterious sense of being, represented by the word I, and equates it with a temporary, passing experience. When a wave of anger passes through our mind-body system, the ego immediately declares, "I am angry." In that statement, a profound and damaging fusion takes place. The I and the angry become one and the same. We are no longer a person experiencing a temporary feeling of anger. We have become anger. Our entire identity shrinks to fit the shape of that single emotion. Think of the weight and finality of this language. When we say, I am depressed, we are not just describing a state of low energy and sadness. We are adopting a clinical sounding identity. We become a depressed person. The state, which is by its nature impermanent, is transformed by our language into a solid, personal, and chronic trait. When we fail at a task and think, I am a failure, we have taken a single event and allowed it to define our entire being. We are no longer a person who failed. We are a failure. The verb to be turns a fluid process into a concrete noun. It turns a temporary weather pattern into a permanent climate. This is the ego's most subtle trick. By owning the experience, by fusing our identity with it, the ego reinforces its own illusion of being a solid, separate entity who has these experiences. And in doing so, it makes the suffering feel personal, heavy, and inescapable. Now, let us explore the grammar of awareness, the language of freedom. This language replaces the definitive statement, I am, with the gentle, observational phrase, there is. It is the language of a scientist or a meteorologist, simply noting the phenomena that appear in the field of awareness without judgment and without personal identification. When the energy of anger arises, instead of I am angry, the new internal recognition is, there is anger arising. Or, a feeling of heat and tightness is present in the body. The energy of anger is here. Notice the profound shift that occurs with this simple change. First, it immediately creates space. The anger is no longer you. It is an event happening within you. You are the space in which the anger is unfolding, not the anger itself. You are the sky, and the anger is a storm cloud passing through. This space is the beginning of freedom. Second, it depersonalizes the experience. It is no longer my anger, a shameful personal failing. It is simply anger, a universal human energy. It is a conditioned response that is moving through this particular mind-body system. This removes the heavy layer of guilt and self-blame that so often accompanies our difficult emotions. We can meet the energy with curiosity instead of judgment. Third, this language inherently acknowledges impermanence. The phrase, there is, arising, implies a process. And any process that arises will also, in time, pass away. It treats the emotion as a wave, not a wall. Let us revisit our examples with this new grammar. Instead of the heavy, definitive statement, I am depressed, we can observe, there is a great deal of sadness present. There is a feeling of heavy, low energy in the body. Can you feel the difference? The first is a verdict. The second is an observation. It is gentler, more spacious, and allows for the possibility of change. Instead of the crushing self-judgment, I am a failure, we can note, there is a feeling of disappointment here. There are thoughts of self-criticism arising after that event. We are not denying the painful feeling, but we are refusing to make it our identity. We are unfusing ourselves from the experience. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates this state of pure, non-identified experience. A person is walking through a field when they are spotted by a ferocious tiger. They run as fast as they can, the tiger hot on their heels. They come to the edge of a high cliff. With no other option, they grab onto a thick vine hanging from the edge and swing themselves down into the abyss. As they hang there, clinging for dear life, they look up and see the tiger snarling at them from the cliff's edge above. They look down and see another tiger, waiting expectantly for them on the ground below. Their situation is hopeless. To make matters unimaginably worse, they see two small mice, one white and one black, emerge from a crevice in the cliff. They begin to systematically gnaw on the very vine that is holding them. Day and night, time itself, is eating away at their life. In this moment of absolute existential peril, with certain death above, below, and on the vine itself, the person notices something. Growing from a small ledge on the cliff face is a single, wild strawberry, perfectly red and ripe. Reaching out with their free hand, they pluck the strawberry. They bring it to their lips and put it in their mouth. The story ends with a single, simple line. How sweet it tasted. In that moment of tasting the strawberry, where was the person's story? Where was the thought, I am a person in a terrible situation who is about to die? It was gone. In that instant, there was no past that led them to the cliff, and no future in which the tigers would devour them. There was no self, no problem, no predicament. There was only the direct, pure, unmediated experience of the present moment. There was not even, I am tasting sweetness. There was just sweetness. There is sweetness. This is the mind that this practice points to, a mind that can experience life directly, without the constant filter of the ego's story. This shift from I am to there is therefore not just a clever mental trick. It is a profound and practical tool for liberation that you can use at any moment. When you feel a wave of anxiety wash over you, pause, take one conscious breath, and instead of getting swept away in the story of, I am so anxious, just observe. There is a rapid heartbeat. There is a tightness in the chest. There are thoughts of worry moving through the mind. Simply note what is present. Each time you do this, you are performing a radical act. You are withdrawing your belief from the ego's narrative. You are loosening the knot of identification. You are remembering that you are the sky, not the cloud. You are practicing the art of freedom, one moment at a time. This practice of depersonalizing our own inner experience has a powerful and transformative effect on how we view the world. When we stop taking our own thoughts and emotions so personally, a remarkable thing happens. We stop taking the words and actions of other people so personally as well. When we see our own anger as an impersonal, conditioned energy, we can begin to see the anger of others in the same light. We see their empty boats, driven by their own hidden currents of fear and pain. This shift in perception opens up a space where resentment and blame cannot easily take root. It opens the door to a profound freedom that the ego can never know, the freedom of forgiveness. We have learned to quiet the inner narrator, to see the voice in our head as an empty boat adrift on the currents of consciousness. We have practiced shifting our internal grammar from the solid, identifying statement of I am, to the spacious, observational phrase of there is. This practice of depersonalizing our own inner experience, seeing our anger, fear, and sadness as impersonal, passing energies rather than our core identity, naturally begins to change how we see the world. When we stop taking our own feelings so personally, we begin to stop taking the words and actions of others so personally as well. This opens the door to one of the most profound, healing, and courageous acts a human being can undertake, the act of forgiveness. In the conventional view, forgiveness is often seen as a moral duty, an act of grace bestowed upon someone who has wronged us. It is often tangled up with ideas of condoning their behavior or letting them off the hook. But from the perspective of inner freedom, this view is incomplete. Forgiveness, seen through the lens of wisdom, is not primarily a gift to the other person. It is a radical act of self-liberation. It is the key that unlocks our own prison cell, a cell whose bars are forged from the fire of our own resentment. Let us look honestly at the state of unforgiveness, at the experience of holding a grudge. It is like clutching a hot coal in your hand with the intention of one day throwing it at the person who hurt you, but who is getting burned. The pain, the bitterness, the endless replaying of the story of how we were wronged. This is a poison that we willingly drink, day after day, hoping it will somehow harm our enemy. It is a state of being perpetually tethered to the past, allowing an event that is long over to continue to wound us in the living present. The ego, our inner storyteller, loves a good grievance. A story of being wronged gives the ego a powerful and righteous identity. It gets to be the victim, the martyr, the one who was unfairly treated. This sense of victimhood can feel strangely satisfying, as it provides a solid sense of self and a feeling of moral superiority. To maintain this identity, the ego needs a villain. It keeps the image of the person who hurt us alive and well in our minds, constantly projecting blame and judgment upon them. This story of me, the wronged, and them, the wrongdoer, creates a strong sense of separation, which, as we have seen, is the ego's primary function. The problem is that the price of this righteous identity is our own peace of mind. We sacrifice our inner freedom to maintain a story that keeps us locked in a cycle of pain. How do we break free? The first step is to apply the wisdom of the empty boat not just to our own inner voice, but to others. When someone acts in a way that causes us pain through their words, their actions, their negligence, or immediate, conditioned reaction is to see a malicious pilot in their boat. We believe their action was a deliberate, personal attack on me. We create a story of intent, of malice, of a solid, bad person who chose to harm us. The practice of wise forgiveness invites us to look more deeply. It invites us to see that, in most cases, their boat is just as empty as our own. Their actions are not born from a place of solid, sovereign evil, but are themselves the product of unseen currents. Their own conditioning, their own fears, their own insecurities, their own unhealed pain. As the saying goes, hurting people hurt people. The lashing out, the criticism, the betrayal, these are very often the clumsy, tragic manifestations of their own inner suffering. When we begin to see the fear behind their anger, the insecurity behind their arrogance, the pain behind their carelessness, our own hardened resentment can begin to soften. It can transform into something unexpected, a sense of compassion. This does not mean we must excuse harmful behavior. Forgiveness is not about becoming a doormat. It is perfectly possible, and often necessary, to set firm boundaries, to say no, or to remove ourselves from a toxic situation. But we can do so from a place of clear, compassionate wisdom, rather than from a place of reactive bitterness. We can protect ourselves without poisoning ourselves with hatred. Seeing the empty boat in the other person is not for their benefit, it is for ours. It unhooks us from the toxic bond of resentment and allows us to move on. Now we come to the most radical and liberating aspect of this teaching, a question that cuts to the very heart of the illusion. When we hold on to a grudge, we repeat the phrase, "I was hurt." But who precisely is this I that was hurt? Let us investigate. Was it your physical body that was hurt? A physical wound, over time, heals and changes. The cells that were damaged are replaced. Is the body you have today the same body that was hurt 5 years ago? Number. Was it a feeling that was hurt? We know that feelings are impermanent waves, arising and passing away. The raw feeling of pain from an insult is long gone. Was it a thought? Thoughts are just clouds, fleeting mental events. So what is it that remains hurt, that carries the wound for months, for years, for a lifetime? It is not a real, substantial entity. It is the story of the self. It is the ego's narrative of being a victim, an idea that we keep alive through the fuel of our own constant mental rehearsal. When we realize that there is no solid, permanent self to receive a permanent injury, the entire structure of a grievance begins to collapse. An insult is just a collection of sound waves. A betrayal is just a series of events. They are like stones thrown into a river. They make a splash, they create ripples, and then they sink to the bottom. The river itself are true, flowing, ever-changing nature is not harmed. It is only the part of us that identifies as a solid stone that feels bruised and chipped. When we let go of the stone-like identity, we realize there is no fixed entity to defend, and therefore no permanent wound to hold on to. The perfect illustration of this is a famous Zen story. 2 monks, one senior and one junior, were on a long pilgrimage. Their vows included a strict rule against making physical contact with women. One day, they arrived at a river with a swift current. A beautiful young woman was standing there, hesitating, afraid to cross. Seeing her distress, the senior monk, without a word, walked over, hoisted her onto his shoulders, carried her across the turbulent river, and gently set her down on the other side. He then bowed and continued his journey. The junior monk was aghast, his mind reeling from this blatant violation of their sacred vows. For hours, the 2 monks walked in silence, but the junior monk was consumed by a storm of inner turmoil. He was brooding, agitated, and filled with righteous judgment. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he burst out, "Brother, how could you do that? Our vows are sacred. We are forbidden to touch women, and you carried her across the river as if it were nothing." The senior monk stopped, looked at his younger companion with eyes full of compassion, and smiled gently. He said, "Brother, I left that woman by the riverbank hours ago. Are you still carrying her?" This story beautifully reveals the nature of forgiveness. Forgiveness is the act of putting the woman down. It is the act of refusing to carry the past into the present. The senior monk responded to the need of the present moment with compassion, and then the moment was over for him. He was free. The junior monk, clinging to a rule, to a story of transgression, to a grievance, was a prisoner of an event that was long past. He was the one who was truly suffering. To forgive, then, is the ultimate act of self-love. It is the decision to stop drinking the poison of resentment. It is the choice to empty our own boat of the heavy, painful stones of past grievances so that we can navigate the river of life with lightness and grace. This profound ability to let go, to see the illusory nature of both the offense and the self that was offended, is rooted in an even deeper, more subtle understanding of reality. It is rooted in the wisdom of emptiness, the recognition that nothing, not ourselves, not others, not even the events of our liveshas, any fixed, independent, or solid existence. This is the next great ocean we must cross. We have walked the path of forgiveness and found that it is a profound act of self-liberation, made possible by seeing that there is no solid, separate self to be permanently harmed. This insight, that the self is not a solid entity, is a doorway. And now, our journey invites us to step through that door into a space that is vaster, more subtle, and even more freeing. We are about to explore the very heart of Mahayana Buddhist wisdom, a concept known by the Sanskrit term sunyata, often translated as emptiness. This word, emptiness, can be frightening. It conjures images of a cold, dark void, of nothingness, of a denial of life itself. This is the single greatest misunderstanding of this profound teaching. Emptiness is not a nihilistic black hole. It is, in fact, the most positive, potent, and life-affirming realization imaginable. It is not the negation of existence, but the key that unlocks the very possibility of existence. It is the ultimate flowering of the insights of no self and interconnectedness. To understand this, let us begin not with complex philosophy, but with simple, everyday objects. Consider a teacup. What is the most essential, most useful quality of a teacup? It is not the fine porcelain of its walls or the elegant curve of its handle. The most essential quality of a cup is the empty space inside it. If the cup were not empty, if it were a solid block of clay, it would be useless as a cup. It could not hold your tea, your coffee, or your water. Its entire function, its very cupness, is dependent upon its emptiness. Now, consider the room you are in right now. What makes this room a room? It is not the four walls, the floor beneath you, or the ceiling above. It is the empty space that these boundaries enclose. It is this emptiness that allows you to live, to move, to breathe, to work, to be. The value of the room is its emptiness. The ancient Taoist text, the Tao Te Ching, speaks of the wheel of a cart. 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It is the center hole that makes it useful. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. One emptiness in this sense is not a lack. It is pure potentiality. It is receptivity. It is the womb of all possibility. This understanding of emptiness as potentiality is the key to seeing its connection with the web of interbeing we explored earlier. Sunyata and dependent origination are two sides of the same coin. The reason that all things can be interconnected is precisely because they are empty of a separate, independent, unchanging essence. Let us revisit the sheet of paper. We saw that the paper's existence depended on the cloud, the sun, the logger, the earthon, all the non-paper elements. We can now rephrase this with our new understanding. The sheet of paper is empty of a separate, intrinsic paper, self. It has no self-nature. Because it is empty in this way, it is able to be a vessel for the entire universe. Because it is empty, it can be filled with everything else. If things were not empty, they each had a solid, fixed, independent core. The universe, as we know it, could not exist. The world would be a collection of metaphysical billiard balls, each one sealed off from the others, unable to interact, influence, or change one another. A seed could not become a tree. Water could not become ice or steam. You could not digest food and turn it into your own body. All change, all relationship, all life is possible only because phenomena are empty of a fixed, separate self. Emptiness is not a void. It is the dynamic, fluid, and relational nature of reality itself. It is the ultimate statement that nothing is absolute and everything is relational. This profound philosophical truth has a direct and powerful psychological application. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates the wisdom of an empty mind. A highly educated university professor, renowned for his knowledge of spiritual texts, traveled to visit a reclusive Zen master to learn about Zen. The master welcomed him and, as is customary, offered him a cup of tea. As the master prepared the tea, the professor, eager to display his own erudition, began to talk non-stop. He spoke of all the scriptures he had read, the complex philosophical theories he had mastered, and his own sophisticated understanding of the nature of reality. The master listened patiently. When the tea was ready, he began to pour it into the professor's small cup. He filled it to the brim, but then he did not stop pouring. The hot tea overflowed the cup, spilled into the saucer, and began to run onto the floor. The professor, startled out of his monologue, jumped up and cried, "Stop, stop. The cup is already full. No more will go in." The Zen master calmly set down the teapot, looked the professor in the eyes, and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The empty mind or empty cup of Zen is not a mind that is blank, stupid, or devoid of knowledge. It is a mind that is free from the clutter of its own prejudices, its own fixed ideas, its own dogmatic beliefs. It is a mind that is open, spacious, receptive, and deeply curious. It is what is often called beginner's mind. A beginner's mind is willing to see things freshly, as they truly are, rather than through the thick, colored filter of its own conditioning. An expert's mind is often closed, believing it already knows the answers. An empty mind is always ready to learn. So, how do we practice this wisdom of emptiness in our daily lives? We practice by letting go of our rigid definitions, of our need to put reality into fixed, solid boxes. We begin by emptying our definition of ourself. We stop clinging to labels like "I am an anxious person" or "I am a successful person." We see these as temporary, fluid descriptions, not as our ultimate identity. We give ourselves the space to be undefined, to change, to grow, to surprise ourselves. We then extend this to others. We practice emptying our minds of our judgments and preconceptions about them. We stop seeing our partner, our children, or our colleagues as fixed entities about whom we know everything. We try to meet them freshly in each moment, recognizing that they, too, are flowing, complex processes, full of a potential that our labels may be blinding us to. Finally, we practice emptying our mind of its rigid ideas about the world itself, of how things should be. We learn to meet life as it is, in all its messy, unpredictable, and beautiful reality, with a spirit of open inquiry rather than rigid expectation. This is the very essence of wisdom, a fluid, responsive, and creative dance with reality, rather than a clumsy and painful attempt to force reality to conform to our ideas. We have journeyed now into the very heart of liberating wisdom. We have seen that the self, and indeed all things, are empty of a solid, separate, independent existence. And we have discovered that this emptiness is not a terrifying void, but a dynamic, interconnected, and joyful potentiality. It is the ultimate freedom from all fixed positions. A profound question now arises. When the cup of the self is truly seen as empty, what is it that naturally flows in to fill it? When the cold illusion of separation dissolves, what is the warmth that remains? The natural, logical, and heartfelt response to a world of empty, interconnected beings is an unconditional, boundless care. The fruit of wisdom is compassion. We have journeyed to the very core of reality and found not a solid, separate self, but a dynamic, flowing, and interconnected truth. We have stood before the wisdom of emptiness, sunyata, and seen that all things, including ourselves, are empty of a fixed, independent essence. This is the ultimate intellectual and spiritual catharsis. It is the act of emptying the cup of the self, letting go of all the rigid ideas and identities we have clung to for so long. And a profound question naturally arises from this emptiness. What is left? What fills the cup once it has been emptied of the self? Is it a cold, barren void? The answer is a resounding no. When the cold, hard illusion of the separate self melts away, it reveals the radiant warmth that was always there, connecting everything. The natural, spontaneous, and logical expression of a mind that has realized emptiness and interbeing is karuna. It is boundless compassion. Compassion, in this context, is not the emotion we usually associate with the word. It is not pity. Pity comes from a place of separation and superiority. When we pity someone, we look down from our safe, stable position at the unfortunate other who is suffering. We feel sorry for them. This act, while perhaps well-intentioned, reinforces the wall between me and you. It maintains the ego's position. Compassion is also more than simple empathy. Empathy is the ability to feel what another person is feeling. While this is an important human capacity, if we are not grounded in wisdom, we can easily become overwhelmed by another's pain, leading to emotional burnout and distress. We can drown in their suffering. Karuna, true compassion, is something deeper. It is the heart's tremor in response to the presence of suffering, combined with the wise and calm aspiration to help alleviate that suffering. It is a feeling with someone, not just feeling for them. It arises from the profound recognition that there is no fundamental separation between us. It is the logical conclusion of the wisdom of no self. When the walls of the ego dissolve, we realize that the boundary between my suffering and your suffering is a porous, arbitrary line. Compassion is the heart's natural response to reality, unclouded by the ego's self-interest. It is not something we have to force ourselves to do as a moral duty. It is simply what happens when we see clearly. Let us trace the logic of this. We began by understanding impermanence. When we truly see that all beings, without exception, are subject to the same laws of sickness, aging, loss, and death, it fosters a sense of shared vulnerability. We are all in this together. This shared fragility is the common ground upon which compassion can grow. We then looked at no self and emptiness. When we see that there is no solid, separate me to protect, and no solid, separate you to blame, the very basis of conflict begins to dissolve. The energy we once spent defending our ego is now freed up to be used for connection and care. Finally, we explored interconnectedness through the metaphor of Indra's net. If we are all jewels in the same cosmic web, if your existence is reflected in mine and mine in yours, then your suffering is, in a very real way, my own. To help you is to help myself. To harm you is to harm myself. In this light, selfishness is not just immoral, it is illogical. It is based on a fundamental misreading of the nature of reality. Compassion, therefore, is the most pragmatic and intelligent way to live. There is a beautiful story from the life of the young Prince Siddhartha, who would later become the Buddha, that illustrates this compassionate impulse. One day, the prince was walking in the royal gardens with his cousin, Devadatta. Devadatta was practicing his archery and, seeing a swan flying gracefully overhead, he took aim and shot it. The bird, pierced by the arrow, fell from the sky and landed near where Siddhartha was walking. The prince rushed to the wounded creature. With immense gentleness, he cradled the bird, carefully extracted the arrow, and used herbs to soothe the wound. Just then, Devadatta ran up and angrily demanded the swan. "I shot it," he declared. "It is mine, by right of skill." Siddhartha looked at his cousin and refused to hand it over. He replied, "You tried to take its life. I have tried to save its life. Life can only belong to that which preserves and cherishes it, not to that which seeks to destroy it." This was not an act of pity. It was an active, engaged response, born from a deep, intuitive reverence for life, a reverence that saw the suffering of the swan as something to be immediately and directly addressed, transcending any egoic claim of ownership or power. So how do we cultivate this profound quality in our own lives? Where do we begin? The surprising and essential starting point is with ourselves. We cannot offer a cool cup of water to another if our own cup is empty. We cannot offer true compassion to the world if we are at war with ourselves. For most of us, our harshest critic, our most relentless judge, is the voice of our own inner narrator. We berate ourselves for our mistakes. We hate ourselves for our perceived flaws. We live in a state of constant self-evaluation and self-improvement that is rooted in the belief that we are not good enough as we are. The practice of self-compassion is the radical act of turning the warmth of karuna inward. It is the choice to treat ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend who is suffering. When you make a mistake, when you feel inadequate, when you are overwhelmed by a difficult emotion, you can pause. Instead of launching into the familiar script of self-criticism, you can offer yourself 3 simple things. First, mindfulness. Acknowledge the pain without judgment. This is a moment of suffering. This is really hard right now. Second, common humanity. Remind yourself that you are not alone. Everyone makes mistakes. Suffering is a part of being human. I am not the only one who feels this way. And third, kindness. Offer yourself a gesture of comfort and support. You might place a hand over your heart, feeling its warmth. You might say to yourself, "May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion that I need." Self-compassion is not self-pity or a form of selfish indulgence. It is the very foundation of emotional strength and resilience. It is what fills our own cup, so that we have something to offer when we encounter the suffering of others. Once we are grounded in self-compassion, extending it outwards becomes natural, and one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to express compassion for another person is to offer them the gift of our presence through deep listening. So often, when others speak of their pain, we are not truly listening. We are busy formulating advice, planning our response, relating their story back to our own, or simply waiting for our turn to speak. Deep listening is the practice of setting our own agenda aside completely. It is to listen with our whole being, our ears, our eyes, our heart. It is to listen not just for the words being said, but for the feelings being expressed beneath the words. It is to offer another person the silent, spacious, non-judgmental attention of the sky we have discovered within ourselves. To be truly seen and heard by another person, without judgment or interruption, is a profound form of healing. It alleviates the deep suffering of loneliness and validates their existence. It is a pure act of communion. Compassion, then, is the beautiful and living fruit of this entire path of wisdom. It is the radiant warmth that naturally fills the empty cup of the self. It is the heart's intelligent and tender response to a world it now sees as intimately its own. When our minds are guided by the clear light of wisdom that sees no self in interbeing, and our hearts are warmed by the compassionate impulse to alleviate suffering, our actions in the world begin to change. We no longer need to posture, to pretend, to defend. We no longer need to hide behind the brittle and exhausting masks of the ego. For the first time, we can simply show up in the world, open-hearted and clear-eyed, as we truly are. We have journeyed through the profound landscapes of the mind, from the intricate prison of the ego to the boundless sky of consciousness. We have seen how the wisdom of no self and interbeing gives natural birth to a warm and open-hearted compassion. And now we arrive at the lived expression of this inner transformation. What does a life guided by wisdom and compassion actually look like? It looks like a life of authenticity. It is the profound relief and radical simplicity of living without a mask. From a young age, we are taught to perform. We learn that certain parts of ourselves are acceptable and will be met with approval, while other parts are unacceptable and will be met with rejection or punishment. In response to this conditioning, the ego, in its desperate need for safety and validation, becomes a master costume designer. It creates a vast wardrobe of masks to be worn for different occasions and different audiences. Think of the masks in your own life. There is the mask of the competent professional, the one who is always confident, knowledgeable, and in control, never admitting to doubt, fear, or confusion. There is the mask of the good son or daughter, who is always agreeable, responsible, and eager to please, hiding any feelings of resentment or personal desires that might conflict with the family's expectations. There is the mask of the perfect partner, who is perpetually romantic, supportive, and understanding, concealing any personal needs, irritations, or moments of feeling distant. There is even the mask of the spiritual person, who presents a front of constant calm, serenity, and wisdom, denying any messy human emotions like anger, jealousy, or despair. We have masks of strength that hide our fragility, masks of cynicism that hide our idealism, and masks of indifference that hide our deep longing to be loved. Each mask is a carefully constructed strategy, a shield designed to protect the fragile ego from the perceived dangers of the world. But this protection comes at an immense cost. The first cost is exhaustion. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to maintain these performances. We must constantly monitor ourselves, censor our true thoughts and feelings, and calculate the right way to appear. We live with a persistent, low-grade tension, the strain of holding the mask in place. It is like being an actor on stage, 24 hours a day, with no opportunity to go backstage and rest. This constant performance is the source of a deep and pervasive fatigue that no amount of sleep can cure. The deeper cost is loneliness. When we wear a mask and people like the mask, they are not seeing or liking the real us. The validation we receive feels hollow because deep down, we know it is for the character, not for the actor. This creates a profound sense of being fraudulent and a constant fear of being found out. We feel that if people knew who we really were, with all our imperfections, contradictions, and messy emotions, they would surely reject us. So we are left feeling unseen, unknown, and ultimately alone, even when surrounded by people who seem to admire us. The masks that we wear to feel connected are the very things that prevent true intimacy from ever taking place. A real relationship cannot exist between two masks. So how do we begin to take them off? The path to authenticity is not a sudden, dramatic act of letting it all hang out. It is a gentle and courageous process that flows directly from the wisdom we have been cultivating. True authenticity is the natural radiance of a mind that has learned to practice radical self-acceptance. It is a product of the compassion that we first learned to turn inward. It is the willingness to accept all aspects of our experience, our light and our shadow, without judgment. It is the understanding that our anger, our fear, our sadness, and our confusion are not signs that we are broken. They are simply part of the rich, complex, and universal weather of a human life. They are clouds passing through the vast sky of our being, not permanent stains on our character. When we are no longer at war with ourselves, we no longer need to hide parts of ourselves from others. This gives rise to the courage to be vulnerable. In our society, vulnerability is often mistaken for weakness, but in reality, vulnerability is one of our greatest strengths. It is the courage to be honest, to be real, to show up as we are. It is the willingness to say, "I don't know," when we don't know. It is the courage to say, "I made a mistake," when we have erred. It is the bravery to say, "I'm scared," or "I need help," when we feel overwhelmed. These are not admissions of failure. They are statements of profound humanity. And it is this authentic humanity that allows for true connection. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give others permission to be vulnerable too, creating a space of trust and genuine intimacy. There is a timeless Taoist story that perfectly captures the spirit of a person who lives without a mask, free from the need to perform or control the narrative of their life. There was an old farmer who lived in a border village. One day, for no reason, his only horse ran away. His neighbors came to console him, saying, "Oh, what terrible luck." The old farmer simply replied, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who knows?" A few weeks later, his horse returned, and it brought with it a magnificent wild stallion. The neighbors gathered again, this time to congratulate him, exclaiming, "What incredible good luck!" The farmer again replied, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" The farmer's son, delighted with the new horse, tried to ride it. He was thrown off and broke his leg badly. The neighbors came once more, shaking their heads. "How awful, such bad luck." The old farmer just shrugged. "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" Shortly thereafter, the emperor's army came through the village, conscripting every able-bodied young man for a brutal war from which few would return. Because of his broken leg, the farmer's son was spared. The farmer's peace does not come from having good fortune. It comes from his freedom from the story of good fortune and bad fortune. He is not performing for his neighbors. He is not trying to maintain an image of being blessed or cursed. He is simply living in radical acceptance of reality as it unfolds, without clinging to pleasure or resisting pain. His authenticity is a product of his equanimity. He has emptied his boat of all attachment to outcomes, and so he is free. He lives without a mask. To live authentically is the ultimate expression of this path. It is the profound relief of setting down the heavy wardrobe of masks and realizing you don't need any of them. It is the joy of aligning your inner reality with your outer expression. It is to be guided by the clear sight of wisdom and the warm heart of compassion. This entire journey we have taken, from the deconstruction of the anxious ego to the realization of our boundless, interconnected, and compassionate nature, may seem vast and at times abstract. But the practice of integrating this profound wisdom into the fabric of our daily lives begins with a single, humble, and ever-present tool. It begins with returning our attention to the most fundamental anchor we have to the present moment, the very rhythm of life itself, our breath. We have traveled an immense distance on this inner journey. We have dismantled the very idea of a solid self, explored the profound truths of emptiness and interbeing, and discovered how the wisdom of this path naturally blossoms into compassion and an authentic way of living. This exploration can feel vast, deep, and at times overwhelmingly abstract. The mind may ask, "This is all wonderful, but where do I begin? How do I take these grand ideas and make them a living reality in my life, right now?" The answer is beautifully, miraculously simple. The path does not begin with a complex philosophical treatise or a difficult yogic posture. The path begins where life itself begins. It begins with your breath. The breath is the golden thread that stitches our life together. It is our most constant, loyal, and intimate companion, with us from the moment of our birth to the very moment of our death. And yet, for most of our lives, we completely ignore it. The practice of mindfulness of breathing, known in the ancient Pali language as anapanasati, is the art of returning to this humble, ever-present anchor. It is the foundational practice of this entire path, the home base to which we can always return, no matter how far we have wandered. Why is the breath so central, so powerful? Firstly, the breath is always and only in the present moment. Your mind is a time traveler, constantly wandering into the regrets of the past or the anxieties of the future. But your breath cannot do this. You cannot breathe yesterday's breath, and you cannot breathe tomorrow's. To bring your awareness to the sensation of breathing is, by definition, to bring your awareness back to the here and now, the only place where life is actually happening. It is a direct and undeniable antidote to the time-traveling mind. Secondly, the breath is a unique bridge between our conscious and unconscious worlds. Most of the time, breathing is an automatic, autonomic process, managed by the ancient wisdom of our nervous system without any conscious effort. Yet, we can also choose to influence it. We can consciously take a deep breath or hold our breath. This gives it a special quality, making it a gateway through which we can begin to communicate with and soothe the deeper, non-verbal parts of our being. Furthermore, the breath is a perfect mirror of our inner state. When you are anxious or frightened, your breath becomes shallow, rapid, and uneven. When you are angry, it can become forceful and hot. When you are calm and relaxed, your breath is naturally deep, slow, and rhythmic. By simply observing the quality of your breath without judgment, you get an honest, real-time report on your emotional weather. And this is a two-way street. Just as the mind affects the breath affects the mind. By consciously inviting the breath to become slower, deeper, and more gentle, we send a powerful signal of safety and calm back to our nervous system, soothing the turbulent waters of the mind. So, how do we practice? The instructions are disarmingly simple. There is no need for a special chant, an elaborate ritual, or a pretzel-like posture. The first step is simply to find a comfortable and dignified position. You can sit on a chair with your feet flat on the floor and your back straight but not stiff. You can sit on a cushion on the floor with your legs crossed. The important thing is to find a posture that tells your body, we are going to be awake and aware for a few minutes. Let your hands rest easily in your lap and allow your eyes to gently close, or rest your gaze softly on the floor a few feet in front of you. Now, bring your attention to the physical sensation of the breath moving in your body. Don't try to control it or change it in any way. Just let the body breathe all by itself. Your only job is to feel it. You might notice the sensation most clearly at the tip of your nostrils, feeling the coolness of the air as it enters and the slight warmth as it leaves. Or perhaps you feel it more in the gentle rise and fall of your chest, or the expansion and contraction of your abdomen. Choose one of these spots to be your anchor point. Rest your attention there, as you might rest a butterfly on a flower lightly, gently. Feel the entire duration of one in-breath. Feel the pause at the end of it. Feel the entire duration of the out-breath. That is the whole practice. In-breath, out-breath. Simple. Inevitably, within a few seconds, your mind will wander. It will be distracted by a sound, pulled into a memory, or start planning your grocery list. This is not a mistake. It is not a sign that you are a bad meditator. It is simply the nature of the mind to wander. It is what minds do. The real practice of mindfulness happens in the moment you realize your mind has wandered. In that moment, without any anger or self-criticism, you gently acknowledge where your mind went. Thinking or planning. And then you kindly and patiently escort your attention back to the physical sensation of the breath. You may have to do this 10 times or 100 times in a 10-minute sitting. That does not matter. Every single time you notice the mind has wandered and you gently bring it back, you are strengthening the muscle of your attention. That return is the meditation. It is a radical act of kindness and patience toward your own mind. This simple practice has profound implications for our daily lives. The breath becomes a portable refuge, a safe harbor we can return to at any time, especially when we are caught in a storm of difficult emotions. When you feel a surge of anger, a wave of panic, or a cloud of despair, trying to think your way out of it is often like trying to fight your way out of quicksand. The struggle only makes you sink faster. In these moments, you can remember your anchor. You can drop your attention out of the chaotic story in your head and into the solid, physical reality of your body breathing. You can try this simple emergency practice. Take 3 conscious breaths. On the first in-breath, simply be aware. I am breathing in. On the first out-breath, I am breathing out. On the second, as you breathe in, notice the calming quality of the breath. As you breathe out, notice the feeling of release. On the third, just feel your body as a whole, sitting or standing, grounded on the earth. This simple act, which takes less than 30 seconds, can break the hypnotic spell of a powerful emotion. It creates a sacred pause between the stimulus that triggered you and your conditioned reaction. In that pause, you reclaim your freedom, the freedom to choose a wiser, more compassionate response. When the Buddha first began to teach after his great awakening, his disciples, eager for the secret to enlightenment, often came to him expecting complex and esoteric instructions. Yet, time and again, he would return to this foundational practice. He instructed the monks with beautiful simplicity. Breathing in a long breath, one knows. I am breathing in a long breath. Breathing out a long breath, one knows. I am breathing out a long breath. Breathing in a short breath, one knows. I am breathing in a short breath, one. He taught them to be aware of the body with the breath, to calm the mind with the breath. The power of this path is not hidden in complexity. It is revealed in the consistent and patient application of this simple, profound art of returning. It is the understanding that the longest journey, the journey back to our own true nature, is made up of single, conscious breaths. The breath, then, is our training ground. It is the quiet space where we cultivate the qualities of attention, patience, kindness, and non-judgmental awareness. It is our home base, our anchor in the storm. And now that we have established this anchor, we can begin to carry this quality of awareness off the cushion. We can take this inner stillness and see if it can be maintained not just in silence, but amidst the noise and demands of our daily lives. We can venture into one of the most challenging environments of all, the modern workplace. We have established our home base, our anchor in the storm, through the simple, profound practice of returning to our breath. This anchor is not meant to keep us in a state of permanent retreat. It is meant to give us the stability to venture out into the world with a new sense of presence and clarity. And there is perhaps no environment in modern life more in need of this clarity than the workplace. For many of us, the workplace is the primary arena of stress, a theater of egoic conflict where our sense of identity, worth, and security feel constantly on the line. The principles we have been exploring are not spiritual luxuries. They are powerful, practical tools for navigating this challenging terrain with grace and sanity. Let us begin with the central metaphor for this exploration, the lotus flower. The lotus grows in muddy, murky water. Yet, its petals emerge from this environment, perfectly clean, vibrant, and unstained. It draws its nourishment from the mud, but it is not defined by the mud. The workplace, with its pressures, its politics, its deadlines, and its difficult personalities, can often feel like a muddy pond. The practice of mindfulness is the art of becoming the lotus, of learning to live and work within the mud without becoming soiled by it, of maintaining a clear and peaceful mind amidst the chaos. The first and most fundamental step in this practice is to disidentify from your professional role. In our culture, one of the first questions we ask a new acquaintance is, "What do you do?" We have learned to fuse our sense of self so completely with our job title that our self-worth becomes a volatile stock, rising and falling with every success and failure at work. When a project goes well, the ego proclaims, "I am a success." When we face criticism or a setback, the ego whispers, "I am a failure." This attachment is a recipe for chronic anxiety, making our inner peace completely dependent on external factors we can never fully control. The practice of no-self offers a direct antidote. It is the practice of creating a conscious separation between your being and your doing. It is the inner recognition, I have a job, but I am not my job. I perform tasks, but I am not the outcome of those tasks. This doesn't mean you become careless or apathetic. On the contrary, this disidentification is liberating. When your entire sense of self is not on the line with every email you send or every presentation you give, you are freed from the crippling fear of failure. You can approach your work with more creativity, lightness, and a willingness to take intelligent risks. You can collaborate more freely because you are not constantly trying to defend your personal territory. You can do your job and do it well without being consumed by it. In the frantic pace of the modern workday, we often feel like we are running a marathon without any water stations. We rush from task to task, meeting to meeting, constantly bombarded by notifications, with no space to breathe, reset, or even think clearly. The result is a cumulative buildup of stress that leaves us exhausted and depleted by the end of the day. The practice of creating mindful pauses is like building small oases of stillness in the desert of a busy schedule. These are micro-meditations that take no extra time but can completely change the texture of your day. For example, before you log into your next video conference, instead of checking your phone one last time, pause. Close your eyes for just 3 conscious breaths. Feel the air enter your body and feel it leave. Arrive in the present moment before you enter the virtual room. While you are waiting for a large file to download or for your computer to restart, instead of reaching for a distraction, use that found time 30 seconds, a minute, to feel your feet firmly planted on the floor. Feel the support of the earth beneath you. When you walk from your desk to the kitchen to get a glass of water, feel the sensation of each footstep on the ground. Turn that short walk into a walking meditation. These small moments break the relentless momentum of stress. They are opportunities to come home to yourself, to touch your anchor, and to prevent the mud of a chaotic day from clinging to you. Perhaps one of the most difficult challenges at work is dealing with criticism. When a colleague or a manager offers negative feedback, the ego immediately perceives it as a personal attack. Its defenses go up. It might lash out in anger. "You don't know what you're talking about." Deny responsibility, "It wasn't my fault," or collapse into shame. "I'm useless at my job." All of these reactions create more suffering and damage relationships. The mindful approach, rooted in the wisdom of no self, is to learn to receive criticism as simple information. It is data. It may be useful data or useless data. It may be delivered skillfully or clumsily. But it is not a verdict on your fundamental worth as a human being. The practice is to train yourself to respond instead of reacting. When you receive criticism, the first step is always to breathe. Connect with your anchor to calm the initial jolt of the ego's defensive alarm system. Then, listen. Listen with an open mind, not to agree, but simply to understand the other person's perspective. Silently remind yourself, this is information about a project, not an attack on me. Once you have listened, you can sift through what was said. Is there a grain of truth here that can help me learn and improve? If so, take it with gratitude. The rest, the emotional charge, the poor delivery, the unfair assumptions you can let go of, like chaff being separated from wheat. This transforms a potentially painful encounter into a valuable opportunity for growth and preserves your inner peace. Finally, this wisdom invites us to look at our fundamental motivation for working. Much of the stress and conflict in the workplace arises from a competitive, ego-driven mindset. We are conditioned to think in terms of climbing a ladder, of getting ahead, of being better than our colleagues. This is based on the illusion of separation. The wisdom of interbeing invites a profound shift from a motivation of competition to one of contribution. Instead of constantly asking, "What can I get out of this? How does this benefit me?" we can begin to ask, "What can I contribute here? How can my unique skills serve the larger goal of this team, this organization, this community?" This shift changes everything. It moves the focus from the outcome, the promotion, the bonus, the proceso, the process of the work itself. We begin to find satisfaction in doing our work with care, with integrity, and with a spirit of genuine service. The success of a colleague is no longer a threat to our own ego. It is a shared victory for the whole team. This mindset naturally fosters collaboration, trust, and a much more harmonious work environment. The workplace can indeed be a muddy pond, but it is also the perfect training ground for our practice. By disidentifying from our roles, by taking mindful pauses, by receiving criticism as information, and by shifting our motivation to one of contribution, we learn to be the lotus. We learn to stand in the midst of the mud, drawing nourishment from its challenges, yet remaining open, clear, and unstained, bringing a quiet beauty and presence to the world around us. We have now applied this wisdom to our professional lives. Let us now turn our attention to an even more intimate and often more challenging arena where the ego's attachments and stories are most deeply and powerfully entangled, the realm of our personal relationships. We have carried the lotus of our awareness into the muddy waters of the workplace, learning to find stillness amidst its chaos. Now, our journey takes us into an even more intimate and often more turbulent territory, the realm of our personal relationships. If the workplace is the pond, our relationships with partners, family, and close friends are the very soil in which the roots of our ego are most deeply and tenaciously entangled. It is here that our fear of abandonment, our need for validation, and our desperate craving for permanence are at their most powerful. It is here that the illusion of the separate self can cause the most profound joy and the most intense suffering. And it is here that the wisdom of no self offers not a cold detachment, but a path to a warmer, freer, and more authentic way to love. To understand this new way of loving, we must first be brutally honest about the nature of the ego's love. For most of us, conventional love is a transactional arrangement, a contract of need. It is rooted in a deep, often unconscious, sense of personal lack. The ego feels itself to be an incomplete half, searching for another half to feel whole. The unspoken declaration behind much of what we call love is, "I am lonely, and I need you to cure my loneliness. I am insecure, and I need your constant validation to feel worthy. I am bored, and I need your presence to make my life feel meaningful." We fall in love with how another person makes us feel. The very language we use betrays this sense of ownership. We speak of my wife, my husband, my friend. This possessive grammar reveals an underlying view of the other person as an object that exists to fulfill a function in the story of me. This love is conditional. We offer our affection, our care, our attention, but there is an implicit expectation of return. We give love in order to get love, to get security, to get admiration. This entire structure is built on the same shifting sand of the ego we have been exploring. And because it is so unstable, it is a source of immense suffering. When the other person, being a sovereign and ever-changing human being, inevitably fails to meet our unspoken needs and expectations, the ego feels betrayed, neglected, and wounded. The so-called love can then quickly curdle into its opposites: resentment, anger, manipulation, and control. We try to manage the other person, to shape them into the person we need them to be, and in doing so, we suffocate the very life and spontaneity that we were initially attracted to. The wisdom of no self invites us to an entirely different kind of love. It is a love that flows not from a place of lack, but from a place of fullness. It is not about finding someone to complete you, but about finding your own sense of wholeness within, and then sharing that fullness with another. This is the expression of what in the Buddhist tradition are called the Brahma Viharas, or the sublime attitudes, particularly metta, or loving kindness, and karuna, compassion. The core intention of this kind of love is breathtakingly simple and unconditional. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you be free from suffering. It is a genuine, heartfelt wish for the other's well-being, for their own sake, entirely independent of what they can do for you or how they make you feel. It is a love that celebrates the other's existence rather than trying to possess it. It is the difference between saying, "I love that you are mine," and saying with wonder and gratitude, "I love that you are." This does not mean we must become cold, distant, or aloof. This is not a rejection of intimacy. It is a purification of it. It is the crucial shift from attachment to connection. Attachment is the ego's counterfeit version of love. It is rooted in fear, the fear of being alone, the fear of loss, the fear that we are not enough on our own. Attachment is a clenched fist. It is clinging, grasping, and needy. It says, "I need you. I cannot be whole without you." It seeks to merge with the other, to erase boundaries, to create a fused identity, because the ego believes this will finally make it feel secure. But it only leads to suffocation and conflict. True connection, on the other hand, is born from freedom and trust. It is an open hand. It is spacious, respectful, and honors the sovereignty of the other person. Connection says, "My life is immeasurably enriched by your presence in it, but my fundamental well-being does not depend on you." It allows for both profound intimacy and individual autonomy. It is the understanding that a healthy relationship is not about two broken halves trying to make a whole, but about two whole individuals choosing to walk their paths alongside each other for a time. Imagine two magnificent trees growing side by side in a forest. They share the same ecosystem. They drink the same rain. They are warmed by the same sun. They draw nourishment from the same earth. Their branches may reach out and intertwine in a beautiful and intricate dance, providing each other with shade and shelter from the wind. They are deeply connected. But if you look beneath the ground, you will see that their root systems are entirely their own. Each tree has established its own firm foundation. Each tree draws its own nourishment from the soil. Their roots do not choke or strangle each other. Because each tree maintains its own integrity, its own autonomy, both are able to grow to their fullest, most majestic potential, standing strong and tall together. This is the model for a wise and loving relationship. It is a partnership of two whole, sovereign beings who choose to share a life, to support each other's growth, to delight in each other's presence, but who do not demand that the others sacrifice their own truth. The practice of this kind of love is the practice of consciously giving the other person space to be who they are. It is noticing our own tendencies to control, to fix, to change them to better suit our own egoic needs. It is trusting in their journey, just as one tree trusts the other to find its own way toward the light. It is the understanding that the greatest gift we can give to someone we love is the freedom to be themselves. By applying the wisdom of no-self to our most intimate bonds, we learn to love in a way that liberates rather than imprisons both ourselves and the other person. We learn to connect without clinging, to cherish without possessing, and to support without controlling. We have now applied this wisdom to the complex world of our work and to the sacred ground of our relationships. We must now turn this lens of awareness to one of the most fundamental and universal aspects of the human experience, a reality that the ego fears above all others. We must learn how to relate to pain itself, both physical and emotional. And for this, we must learn the profound lesson of the second arrow. We have brought the lens of our awareness to our work and to our intimate relationships, learning to navigate these complex domains with a new sense of freedom and authenticity. Now, we must turn this awareness toward one of the most fundamental and feared aspects of our existence. We must explore our relationship with pain. Many spiritual paths are misunderstood as promising an escape from pain, a ticket to a life of perpetual bliss. But the wisdom we are exploring is not a fantasy. It is a deeply realistic and pragmatic guide to living a human life. And a human life, by its very nature, includes pain, sickness, loss, disappointment, and death are not optional features. They are part of the fabric of existence. This path does not offer a life free from pain. It offers something far more powerful, a way to experience pain without creating suffering. The key to this profound alchemy is found in the teaching of the second arrow. The Buddha once told his disciples a simple parable. He said, "Imagine a person is walking through a forest and is suddenly struck by an arrow. There is an immediate, physical experience of pain. This is unpleasant, it is sharp, and it is real. This, the Buddha said, is the first arrow. It is an unavoidable part of life. We will all, at times, be struck by the first arrows of illness, injury, the loss of a loved one, the sting of criticism, or the disappointment of failure. But what does an unwise person do next? Struck by the first arrow, they immediately begin to generate a cloud of mental commentary and emotional reaction. They think, "Why me? This is terrible. Who shot this arrow? This is so unfair. I can't believe this happened. What if the wound becomes infected? What if I never recover? My life is ruined." This storm of worry, blame, anger, and self-pity, the Buddha explained, is like being shot by a second arrow, right in the very same spot as the first. The pain of the first arrow is physical or circumstantial. It is an objective event, but the pain of the second arrow is entirely mental. It is the suffering we create for ourselves through our resistance to the first. The Buddha said that a wise person, when struck by a first arrow, understands the situation clearly. They feel the pain, but they do not add to it by firing a second, third, or fourth arrow into themselves. They experience the unavoidable pain of life, but they do not experience the optional, self-inflicted suffering. The vast majority of our mental anguish is not caused by the first arrow, but by the poison of the second. This teaching gives us the power to put down the bow. Let us look more closely at the first arrow. It is the raw, direct, and unedited experience of life's unpleasantness. It can be a physical sensation, a throbbing headache, the chronic ache of an old injury, the nausea of an illness. It can also be an emotional sensation, the sharp, hollow pang of grief when someone we love dies, the hot flush of embarrassment when we make a public mistake, the cold stone of disappointment when our hopes are dashed. These experiences are an inescapable part of the human condition. In Buddhist thought, this is part of the first noble truth of dukkha, which doesn't just mean suffering, but also encompasses the inherent unsatisfactoriness, imperfection, and stress of a world where everything is impermanent and not fully within our control. To expect a life without first arrows is to live in a state of delusion, and to fight against their existence is itself a form of suffering. The wise path begins with a courageous acceptance of this reality. Now, let us examine the second arrow, for this is where our freedom lies. The second arrow is the story that the ego immediately tells about the first arrow. It is our mental and emotional reaction, our resistance to the raw experience of what is happening. We fire these arrows at ourselves in many forms. There is the arrow of blame. It's his fault I feel this way. If she hadn't said that, I wouldn't be in this pain. This creates anger and locks us into a narrative of resentment. There is the arrow of self-pity. Why does this always happen to me? Nothing ever goes right for me. I am so unlucky. This reinforces a powerless victim identity. There is the arrow of catastrophizing. This is a disaster. What if it gets worse? I won't be able to handle it. This projects the present pain into an imagined, terrifying future, amplifying our anxiety. There is the arrow of shame. I brought this on myself. I'm so foolish. There's something wrong with me. This turns the pain inward as a deep-seated sense of personal inadequacy. All of these reactions, blame, self-pity, fear, shame, are the work of the ego trying to make sense of the pain, trying to re-establish control by creating a narrative around it. But this narrative is the very source of our suffering. The first arrow is a clean wound. The second arrows are the infection that we introduce into the wound through our own thinking. The initial pain might last for a few moments, a few hours, or a few days. The suffering from the stories we tell about it can last for months, years, or a lifetime. The practice, then, is not to build higher walls to block the first arrows. That is impossible. The practice is to learn how to feel the impact of the first arrow without immediately reaching for the quiver of the second. This requires courage and mindfulness. It is the willingness to be intimate with our own discomfort. When a painful physical sensation or a difficult emotion arises, instead of escaping into the story, the practice is to drop our attention directly into the raw, physical sensations of the experience in the body. If you are feeling grief, drop the story of, "I've lost everything," and ask, "Where do I feel this in my body?" You might find a hollowness in your stomach, a tightness in your throat, a heaviness in your chest. If you are feeling anger, drop the story of, "How dare they?" and notice the heat in your face, the clenching of your jaw, the surge of energy in your arms. The practice is to meet these raw, physical energies with the qualities of awareness we have been cultivating, with a gentle curiosity, with patience, and with a deep sense of self-compassion. We are not trying to fix the feeling or make it go away. We are simply holding it in a kind, spacious awareness. We are breathing with it. We are allowing it to be there, giving it the space it needs to move through us. When we can do this, we make a remarkable discovery. The raw sensation of the first arrow, when stripped of all the mental commentary, is often far more manageable than we believe. It is intense, yes, but it is also a dynamic, flowing energy. It changes. It crests and falls like a wave. It is not the solid, permanent, unbearable block of suffering that our minds make it out to be. It is our resistance, our tensing against the pain, our second arrows that make it feel solid. By learning to soften around the pain, to be with it in this gentle, mindful way, we allow it to follow its natural course and, in its own time, to dissolve. This is the heart of emotional resilience. It is not the absence of pain, but the ability to be present with pain without adding the poison of suffering. It is the courage to meet all of life's experiences, the pleasant and the unpleasant, with an open heart and a steady mind. By learning to feel the first arrow without firing the second, we transform our relationship with difficulty itself. And this acceptance of life's full spectrum leads us to the final, culminating realization of our journey through the body of this teaching. We begin to understand that the purpose of this path is not to arrive at some perfect, pain-free destination in the future, but to learn how to walk the path itself, right here and now, with wisdom, courage, and grace. The journey is the destination. We have come to the end of a long and winding path. We began in the cramped, anxious prison of the ego and have journeyed through the liberating landscapes of impermanence, no self, and interbeing. We have learned to see our thoughts as empty boats, to feel our pain without being defined by it, and to love with a heart open to both connection and freedom. We have applied these insights to the practical realities of our work and our relationships. And so, after all this exploration, a final, crucial question hangs in the air. What is the goal? What is the ultimate destination of this path? Where are we trying to get to? The answer is perhaps the most radical and freeing of all. There is no destination. The journey is the destination. The entire purpose of the path is to learn how to walk the path. The ego, in its relentless habit of striving, loves to turn spirituality into one more ambitious project. It hears of a state called enlightenment or awakening and immediately turns it into a future goal, a prize to be won, a peak to be conquered. It creates a new, more subtle form of anxiety. Am I meditating correctly? Am I making progress? When will I finally get there? This turns the very path that is meant to free us from striving into just another form of striving. It keeps us trapped in the same old pattern of sacrificing the present moment for the sake of an imaginary future. The profound truth is that the freedom you seek is not waiting for you at the end of the road. It is available only in the quality of attention you bring to the step you are taking right now. Liberation is not a state you will one day achieve. It is a choice you can make in this very moment. The choice to be present, the choice to be aware, the choice to be kind to yourself. There is a classic Zen story that illuminates this perfectly. A young, enthusiastic disciple approached his master, full of ambition. He asked, "Master, tell me about your life. What did you do before you became enlightened?" The old master thought for a moment and replied, "Before I was enlightened, I chopped wood and I carried water." The disciple was a bit disappointed by this mundane answer, but he pressed on. "And what about now, master? Now that you are an enlightened being, what do you do all day?" The master smiled gently and replied, "Now that I am enlightened, I chop wood and I carry water." The disciple, completely confused, asked, "Then what is the difference? What has changed?" The master looked at him with great compassion and said, "The difference is everything. Before enlightenment, when I was chopping wood, my mind was thinking about carrying water. I was worried if the buckets were full, or planning what I would do after. When I was carrying water, my mind was already back at the woodshed, thinking about chopping the next piece of wood. Now, when I am chopping wood, there is only chopping wood. When I am carrying water, there is only carrying water. This is the secret. Awakening is not an escape from our ordinary life. It is the ability to be fully present for our ordinary life. The miracle is not to be found in performing extraordinary feats, but in learning to perform our ordinary, everyday tasks, washing the dishes, answering an email, talking with our children with extraordinary, undivided attention. It is the discovery of the sacred within the mundane, the timeless within the ordinary. When your mind is fully present, every act becomes a meditation, every moment a destination. This also means we must redefine our ideas of peace and joy. We often imagine peace as an external condition, a silent room, a life free from problems, a world without conflict. But such a condition will never exist. True peace, the peace of an awakened heart, is not the absence of noise. It is the ability to maintain our inner stillness amidst the noise. It is the calm stability of the deep ocean that is untroubled by the crashing waves on its surface. It is the equanimity of the farmer who simply says, "Who knows?" in the face of life's unpredictable ups and downs. Peace is not something we find. It is something we cultivate within. It is our ability to stay connected to the vast, open sky of our awareness, regardless of the weather. Similarly, the joy of this path is not the giddy excitement that comes from getting what we want or the constant pursuit of pleasure. That is the fleeting happiness of the ego. The joy of an awakened life is deeper, quieter, and far more resilient. It is the joy of genuine connection that arises when we feel our interbeing with others. It is the quiet satisfaction that comes from contributing to the world with a compassionate heart. It is the profound relief that comes from living without the heavy, exhausting burden of the ego's masks and defenses. It is the simple, direct delight in the sensory experience of the present moment, the warmth of the sun on our skin, the taste of a fresh strawberry, the sound of a loved one's laughter. It is a profound sense of well-being that can coexist with sadness, a deep peace that can hold and soften pain. This life is not a passive retreat from the world. It is not about becoming a detached, unfeeling statue on a mountaintop. It is a dynamic and courageous dance between inner stillness and full-hearted engagement. We learn to go inward, to find our anchor in the breath, to rest in the sky of our awareness. This is the contemplative wing of our practice. And from that place of inner strength and clarity, we learn to move outward, to engage with the world's challenges, so our work, our relationships, the suffering of our society with wisdom and compassion. This is the active wing of our practice. Like a bird, we need both wings to fly. We retreat to find our center, and we engage to express our humanity. So we see, in the end, there is nowhere to get to. The practice is lifelong, a continuous process of returning, again and again, to the present moment. The path has no end, because every moment is the end. Every moment is the goal. The entire journey is contained in a single, conscious breath. The purpose is not to reach the ocean, but to learn to flow with the grace of the river. The aim is not to finish the chopping, but to be fully present for the arc of the axe, the scent of the wood, the feeling of the body engaged in its work. The journey is, and always was, the destination. We began this journey together on a vast, lonely shore, watching a person desperately trying to clench a fistful of sand, only to have it slip through their fingers. That image was a metaphor for the anxious, striving ego, grasping for a solid self, for a permanent hold on a world that is, by its very nature, fluid and impermanent. We have walked a long way since that shore. We have dismantled the very notion of a separate self, piece by piece. We have seen that what we thought was a solid stone is actually a flowing river, that what we mistook for a single, isolated jewel is actually a reflection of an entire, infinite net. We have learned to listen to the empty boat of our own inner narrator, and to feel the first arrow of life's pain without firing the second arrow of our own making. We have learned that the journey is the destination, that the sacred is found not in escaping our ordinary life, but in being fully present for it. And so we return to a final, simple truth, the very heart of this entire exploration. The peace you have been seeking is not, and never will be, found out there. It is not a prize to be won at the end of a long struggle. It is not the result of finally acquiring the right job, the perfect partner, the ideal body, or the respect of others. To seek for peace in the ever-changing conditions of the world is to be the person on the shore, forever grasping at sand. The peace we yearn for is an inside job. It is the natural state of a mind that has ceased its war with reality. The core teaching of this path can be distilled into a simple, radical equation: no self, no worry. The constant, low-grade anxiety that hums beneath the surface of modern life is the energy of the ego on permanent guard duty. It is the fear of a phantom king defending a phantom kingdom. It is the ceaseless vigilance required to protect a fragile identity, to defend a fabricated story, to guard a treasure chest that we have discovered is, and always was, completely empty. When you see this, truly see this, not just as an idea but as a felt reality, the entire basis for this anxiety collapses. The guard can finally be dismissed. The worry subsides not because the world has suddenly become a safe and predictable place, but because you have realized that there was never a separate, solid you to be threatened in the first place. Peace is what is left over. It is the quiet stillness of the sky when you stop identifying with the turbulent clouds. This freedom is not a distant dream reserved for ancient sages or cloistered monastics. It is your own true nature, your birthright, waiting patiently for you beneath the noise of your own mind. You do not need to go anywhere to find it. You do not need any special equipment. The most powerful tool you will ever possess for this journey is the one you have with you in this very moment: your breath. The breath is the golden thread that can lead you out of the labyrinth of your thoughts and back to the simple, profound reality of the here and now. The path does not begin tomorrow, or after you have read one more book, or after you have perfected your meditation posture. It begins now. It begins with the simple, courageous, and deeply kind act of feeling one single conscious breath. That one breath is the journey and the destination. It is the act of unclenching your fist. It is the choice to let go of the story. It is the gentle arrival, right here, at the home you never left.